Chapter 99, Chapter 97. Have you ever heard of angels? After investigation, Ares discovered that Atlantis was indeed the best testing ground for the new generation of machine gods. Poseidon possessed the same arrogance as the Olympian gods. Besides demanding absolute respect and obedience from mortals, they basically wouldn't concern themselves with what happened at the lowest levels of a mortal country. Therefore, after Ares returned to Olympus, he immediately issued orders using the Sparta high priest's account, sending a group of bards secretly trained in Sparta on the next batch of merchant ships bound for Atlantis. With the shipping routes opened by the first batch of merchant ships, the voyage of the second batch of merchant ships was much smoother. In less than a week, the second batch of merchant ships from Sparta arrived in Atlantis. They brought many excellent weapons and equipment, as well as food and supplies, and in return, they exchanged for countless gold and silver from Atlantis, transporting these treasures back to Sparta. But at a moment no one knew about, a group of bards quietly disembarked from this fleet. They went to the taverns and ports where the common people of Atlantis gathered, dispersing into 10 areas of the city. When the two batches of Spartan merchant ships left the port, they did not leave but continued to quietly lurk within Atlantis, spreading rumors for their god. A few days later, Poseidon sent an oracle through the temple to the 10 kings of Atlantis, ordering Atlantis to dispatch a fleet to attack Athens. And at this very moment, a rumor about Atlantis is bound to lose this battle also began to quietly spread among the common people of Atlantis. Have you heard of angels? Inside a tavern where the common people of Atlantis gathered, a bard from Sparta strummed his lute strings, pondered for a moment, then lowered his voice and quietly asked, "Angels?" The drunken common people heard this and laughed. "What's that? A messenger from the great Poseidon?" "No." The bard shook his head and then said, "I'll quietly tell you a secret, you absolutely must not tell anyone else. Actually, the sea god Poseidon is a demon who was defeated by the true gods and driven to the earth. His power cannot defeat the gods, but he can suppress mortals. Atlantis is the demonic city he built, and the royal family of Atlantis are demons with Poseidon's blood flowing through them. If this statement were heard by the nobles and royal family of Atlantis, they would surely order this bard to be arrested and executed. However, the common people of Atlantis wouldn't care so much. For them, whether the authority of the sea god Poseidon existed or not was not important. What was most widely circulated among the common people of Atlantis were Poseidon's romantic affairs and various embarrassing stories of his defeat by the gods. So, when these common people heard what the bard said, they all laughed heartily. "What nonsense are you talking about? How could Poseidon be a demon? Don't disbelieve me. Demons are best at disguising themselves as deities." The bard said solemnly, "Look, isn't Atlantis currently under Poseidon's command to go to war? In fact, the gods have already discovered this demonic city built by Poseidon and intend to destroy it. Just wait, Atlantis is bound to lose this battle." Hearing his words, the common people of Atlantis burst into laughter, and the tavern was filled with joyous air for a while. But the bard was not annoyed. Instead, he smiled, strummed his lute, and continued to boast to this group of people with dirty jokes compiled from Poseidon's romantic affairs. His goal had been achieved. Regardless of whether these common people believed him or not, they would surely help him spread this rumor. Then, once Atlantis suffered a defeat in battle, the truthfulness of this rumor would be established, and it would spread from 10 to 100. At that point, with a little more guidance, the faith in the machine gods would easily spread among the common people of Atlantis. Moreover, he was not fighting alone. Things like tonight were happening simultaneously in other parts of Atlantis. The bards from Sparta quickly spread this prophecy among the common people of Atlantis. A few days later, the Atlantis fleet set sail, carrying the Sea King's wrath and 5,000 Atlantean warriors, departing from Atlantis's 10 ports and majestically heading towards Athens, the sinful city that had offended the Sea King. At the same time, another batch of Spartan merchants arrived in Athens. Unlike the purely commercial fleet bound for Atlantis, This Spartan merchant fleet included not only merchants from Sparta but also a group of warriors, cloaked and helmeted, carrying long spears, shields, and short swords, whose bodies were so robust they seemed almost inhuman. They were mercenaries from Sparta, hired to do a job. The Athenians paid them, and they were responsible for helping Athens beat up their other business partner, Atlantis. The human leader of Athens immediately received them. When he saw these imposing Spartan warriors, who exuded immense pressure just by standing there, the Athenian leader couldn't help but secretly swallow his saliva. He inwardly compared Athens' current army with these Spartans and found that if these Spartans wished, they could conquer Athens with no effort at all. Fortunately, Athena was currently in the temple. The Athenian leader thought to himself, a smile appearing on his face. He extended a hand of friendship to the commander of these Spartans and said, "Thank you for coming to help. With the warriors of the god of war assisting us, Athens is bound to win this battle. There's no need for such pleasantries." The Spartan commander, however, showed no intention of being polite with the Athenian leader. With a stern face, like an iron statue, he spoke to the Athenian leader in a cold, hard tone. "We are mercenaries, we do what we're paid for, nothing more. No more idle talk, where should we set up our camp?" Sensing the Spartans' distant attitude, the Athenian leader withdrew his hand, no longer seeking to embarrass himself. He casually rubbed his nose to hide his awkwardness, then said to the Spartans, "Your camp has already been chosen. Please follow us. During the operation, please be sure to cooperate with our actions." "Of course, we know that." After a brief conversation, the Athenians led the Spartan mercenaries to a high ground by the sea. This place was indeed very suitable for setting up a military camp, with good views and terrain. So, after the Spartan commander expressed his satisfaction, he sent off the Athenians and then ordered his warriors to start cutting down trees from the nearby forest to construct some defensive fortifications and an encampment on site. He himself went to the center of the camp, set up a small tent, and then, along with his chief of staff who arrived shortly after, entered the tent. "How is the intelligence gathering on Athens?" As soon as they entered the tent, the two sat opposite each other, and the Spartan commander immediately asked, "I have already drawn the map." His chief of staff handed a scroll of papyrus to the commander. "Regarding the military strategies the Athenian commander will adopt, I am also ready to start recording. There's one more thing." "What is it?" "I found that the Athenians recently captured a group of slaves from somewhere and are urgently training them into an Athenian army," the Spartan chief of staff said. "What's so strange about that?" The Spartan commander unfolded the map, saying without lifting his head, "Athens has just been established, and all their weapons and equipment need to be bought from us. Their army has only just taken shape, otherwise, we wouldn't be here. Those slaves are probably people they captured after defeating nearby nomadic tribes, specifically to deal with the Atlanteans. That's what I find strange." The Spartan chief of staff had a somewhat peculiar expression on his face. Logically, they are merely consumables captured by the Athenians, yet there are Athena's priests treating the wounds of these slaves and delivering food and water. Is this something priests would do? Perhaps Athena wants to win over people's hearts through such means. No, do slaves need to be won over? The Spartan commander thought for a moment and could only say, "Let's wait and see. Our main purpose is still to train with the Atlanteans." The chief of staff inquired, "So, should this matter be reported to the high priest?" The Spartan commander thought for a moment, then nodded, "Since the high priest ordered us to report everything in detail, we will obey the command." Chapter 100, Chapter 98. Hello, are you there? Are Athena's priestesses bandaging the wounds of slaves, delivering water and food? When the high priest of Sparta, who was also Ares himself, saw the report sent back from the Athens front, a strong sense of surprise arose in his heart. Has Athena awakened? Does she know to first please the people at the bottom and gain their support? No, that shouldn't be possible. Athena's primary goal right now is to deal with Atlantis. These slaves must be cannon fodder that she's pulling out to send to their deaths. Since they're all going to die anyway, what's the point of trying to win them over? In this era, treating slaves well wouldn't be understood by the Athenians. Those Athenians are Athena's base, and she couldn't possibly do something like sacrificing her knight to save her rook. After thinking it over, Ares decided to go and see for himself. At this time, Athena was personally sitting in the temple in Athens, so Ares, to avoid alarming her, did not go using his divine power avatar. He directly created a body of an ordinary adult man, pretending to be a savage, wearing only a piece of animal skin around his waist, and ran naked outside Athens, even shamelessly stealing things from the Athenians. His behavior was quickly discovered by the Athenians. The Athenians gathered 3 or 5 men and quickly devised a plan to catch him, and they threw him into the center of the slaves who had just been captured from outside Athens, preparing to train them into soldiers to fight against the upcoming Atlanteans. Ares quietly shrank into a corner and stayed in the Athenian slave camp for a while. At noon, the other slaves, who had been drilled by the Athenians all day, were driven back with exhaustion by the Athenians in the same way as livestock, and behind them, sure enough, there was a little girl wearing Athena's priestly robes and a hood, following along. While the other slaves, with tired or painful expressions, collapsed crookedly on the straw mats near Ares, this priestess also walked over holding a wooden box. She opened the wooden box, which contained some herbs and bandages. This young girl crushed the herbs together, mixed them on the bandages, and then began to treat the injured slaves, and incredibly, when these slaves with desperate or angry faces saw the girl walking over, they actually began to slowly relax. Because it was just training, the number of slaves injured was not too many. Soon, this priestess girl completed the bandaging. She picked up the wooden box and left. After a while, she came back pushing a cart, which was loaded with a lot of food and clean water. This priestess girl distributed these crude foods and clean water to the slaves present, and the Athenians responsible for guarding the slaves next to the slave camp turned a blind eye to this and did not interfere with her behavior at all. Ares carefully distinguished the identity of this priestess girl. Although the black hood on her head obscured most of her face, Ares still caught a glimpse of the purple hair and white chin under her hood from her movements. Is it really Medusa? Why is she here now? After thinking about it, he couldn't understand, so he called out. Priestess, have mercy on me. I just arrived today, and I'm hungry and haven't had a sip of water. It's been so long, and I'm about to die of thirst and hunger. Hearing his voice, the priestess turned around and looked at him. The Athenians next to her also laughed and said, Priestess, you don't need to pay attention to him. This slave isn't from your tribe. He's just a petty thief who was caught stealing things and became a slave. Ares glared at the Athenian angrily, then pretended to be very weak, lay down on the ground, and looked at the priestess with a pleading expression. The priestess looked at him, not knowing what she was thinking, and finally took some food and water and handed it to him. Here, eat. Thank you, priestess, you are such a kind person. Ares took the food and water she handed over, and also took this opportunity to finally see the face under her hood. Under the hood was a beautiful goddess's face, with a hint of coldness in her loveliness, purple hair hanging from her ears, and her eyes looked a little listless. It was indeed the pitiful anti-hero Medusa of later generations. So Ares quickly solved the coarse grains and water Medusa handed over, and without caring what the things he swallowed tasted like, he shouted to Medusa, Kind priestess, thank you for saving my life, I want to give you a gift. While speaking, he took out a beautiful hair accessory from his arms. The hair accessory had a black ribbon tied into a bow, which looked very cute. This was originally made by the fire god Hephaestus, who wanted to use it to pursue Athena and win Athena's favor. After his courtship was beaten up by Athena, the disheartened fire god was prepared to abandon all these things, but after Ares saw it, he took it from his brother. His little finger quietly rubbed the gem in the middle of the hair accessory, leaving a simple magic, and then he reached out and handed the hair accessory to the priestess, but his actions aroused the anger of the Athenian guards next to him. The Athenians walked up with wooden sticks and hit Ares's arm, while scolding. "You slave, you dare to hide things secretly." Ares's body was just a mortal body, so after being hit, he still felt pain. He couldn't help but loosen his hand, and the hair accessory also fell into the sand and dust. He retracted his hand, carefully remembered the face of the Athenian who hit him with a stick, and then retorted. "This hair accessory is something my mother left me, not your property. You dare to resist." Two Athenians walked over with wooden sticks, preparing to beat Ares's body, but the priestess raised her hand and stopped the two Athenians. "Okay, stop." After stopping the two Athenians' violence, the young priestess slowly squatted down, picked up the hair accessory from the sand on the ground, patted off the dust, and then said to Ares, "Thank you, I will cherish it." She put the oath on her head in front of Ares and a group of slaves, and then turned and left the slave camp. The time Athena allowed her to visit her believers for a day had ended. Now, she had to return to the Parthenon to work for Athena. At night, the Athenian guards outside the slave camp suddenly saw the Spartan commander leading several Spartan strong men, following their leader, walking over together. "Our war with Atlantis is about to begin," the Athenian leader said to his guards. "At this time, the more strength we can get, the more strength we will have, so I have asked the Spartan warriors to come and do combat training with you, so that you can control the Pelasgians inside when they go to the battlefield." Then he waved his hand, and someone behind him carried over 2 boxes, which were all wooden sticks with smoothed edges, just like the wooden sticks the Athenian guards used to control the slaves. At this time, the Spartans were preparing to use them as training equipment. "Come on, let's start directly." The Spartan commander reached out and pulled out a wooden stick from the box, and the other Spartan warriors also took one each, stood in a neat row, and looked at the Athenian slave camp guards. Under the order of the Athenian leader, the Athenian guards of the entire slave camp reluctantly formed groups of 3 or 2 and each faced a Spartan. The Spartan commander looked at the 2 Athenian guards who had hit Ares's arm with wooden sticks today. He stared at the 2 guards for a while, until they felt a chill in their hearts. Then, the cold commander suddenly showed a cruel smile and waved to them. "Come, come, come, you 2 come over, I will personally accompany you to exercise." At the same time, Medusa, who had finished her day as a priestess, returned to the high-end stone house next to the Parthenon that Athena had prepared for her. She washed her body, changed into another set of clothes, but had no sleepiness, but came to the window, looked up at Selene's chariot, and looked at the distant sea. At that time, Athena led the Athenians to forcibly occupy the Pelasgians' tribe, demoted all the Pelasgians to slaves, and also wanted to take all 3 of her sisters as subordinate gods and take them to Olympus. Although the Medusa sisters had never been there, they had heard that there were many terrible gods on that mountain. They possessed great power, and they liked to forcibly occupy some beautiful women and goddesses as wives. If they went there, Stheno and Euryale, the 2 goddesses who had no combat power, and even Medusa, were likely to encounter such misfortune. Therefore, Medusa did not hesitate to lower her godhood and exchanged her 2 sisters' freedom from Athena on the condition of being a priestess for Athena. However, Euryale and Stheno were still not allowed by Athena to appear on the earth, so they were exiled by the goddess of wisdom and driven to an invisible island near the sea where the golden apple was located, as neighbors to the dragon Laodan. In this way, Medusa and her 2 sisters would probably be difficult to see each other again in the future. She could only look up at the moon and miss her 2 sisters. However, just as she was missing her relatives while looking at the moon, suddenly, a stream of light flashed on the hair accessory on her head. Then, as if something inside was activated, a somewhat rough male voice came to Medusa's mind. "Hey, hey, is anyone there?" Chapter 101, Chapter 99 Trade. Medusa was startled by the voice that suddenly rang in her head. Who are you? It seems to be connected. The man's voice continued, this is a mental link. You just need to speak in your mind. As a goddess, you must have spoken to your followers before. Medusa closed her mouth. She glanced guiltily at the Parthenon next to her, then asked in her mind. Excuse me, who are you? My name. The man said with a slight smile, you can call me Ares. God of war. Medusa's heart grew wary. What do you want with me? Don't be so nervous. Ares soothed Medusa's emotions, then continued to ask, if I'm not mistaken, you should be Medusa of the Gorgon sisters, right? As a goddess, why would you abandon your divinity and become Athena's priestess? Also, where are your two older sisters? Euryale and Stheno, where did they go? Medusa remained silent. All right, if you don't believe me, there's nothing I can do. Ares paused, then continued, then I'll guess myself. It looks like you must have some leverage held by that woman Athena. Since you're here as a priestess, then your two sisters are either imprisoned somewhere by Athena, or she has driven them away. Furthermore, today you specifically went to tend to, give water and food to those slaves who are clearly not Athenians. Those people must be your original people, either followers of you Gorgon sisters, or a tribe that lived with you. They must have been used as cannon fodder by Athena to deal with the Atlanteans. Athenians are truly weak. They even need slaves to fight in a war. In the Greek world, war was also an important part of a city-state citizen's rights, because killing enemies on the battlefield could earn military merits, which could be said to be the fastest way to advance in the Greek world. Normally, Greek city-states would not allow slaves to compete with citizens for military merits on the battlefield. However, Athenians had no choice now. Athena could not send out a large number of her followers in the early days of Athens' establishment, so she captured this group of slaves to use as cannon fodder for war. Am I wrong? Ares rambled on, then asked. Medusa was silent for a moment, then replied somewhat coldly. So, is the great god of war here to mock and ridicule me? How could that be? That's not what a warrior does. Ares said. I'm just here to offer you a small trade, one that can give those slaves their freedom back, and even make them citizens. If things continue like this, once the Atlanteans' fleet arrives, that woman Athena will definitely sell your people without hesitation. By then, whether they survive will probably depend solely on fate. Hearing Ares's words, Medusa was somewhat moved. She quietly asked. What trade? It's very simple. You continue to stay in Athens, be Athena's priestess, act as my inside contact when necessary, and you can also ask me for help when you encounter difficulties and dangers. Ares said, and I will mobilize my people to find a way to buy your people, take them back to Sparta, and let them become people of the Sparta. How about this trade? These terms from Ares were incredibly generous to Medusa, almost like a free gift. She had already fallen to this point, and her situation could hardly get any worse than it was now. She naturally knew what Athena intended to do by capturing her followers, but she was powerless to resist and could only watch. Otherwise, even her two exiled sisters might fall victim to the goddess of wisdom. And now, Spartans were stationed outside Athens. If the god of war gave the command, and if Athena did not intervene, they could even twist off the heads of the Athenians' leaders before dawn and present them before the god of war's throne. Similarly, it would naturally be an easy matter for Ares to rescue a group of slaves. However, because of Athena, Medusa was extremely distrustful of the gods of Olympus at this time. After thinking carefully for a moment, she asked. Such terms are too generous for me. Why would you do this? We've never met before, have we? The answer is simple. Ares's voice was somewhat triumphant. I, Ares, just like to do things that annoy Athena. Medusa seemed somewhat speechless. Please don't fool me. After she reacted, she said somewhat angrily, if you want to make a trade, at least tell me what you want openly and honestly. Given my current situation, even if the god of war wants to take me by force, can I even resist? I'm serious. Ares's voice became serious, and a little helpless. Alas, the image of male gods on Olympus has been completely ruined by Zeus and Poseidon. Why would I take you by force? To cause trouble for myself. After a slight pause, Ares continued. I just can't stand Athena and the gods' attitude of taking everything for granted as being inferior to themselves. My terms are here, you consider them yourself. Those slaves outside are your followers anyway, they have nothing to do with me. If you've thought it through, you can infuse this hair ornament with magic, and it will connect to me. Oh, and you only have 3 days to consider. In 3 days, the Atlanteans' fleet will arrive in the waters off Athens. After he finished speaking, Ares seemed ready to end the communication. Medusa quickly called out to him. No need, great Ares, I accept this trade. Oh? I suggest you think carefully, you know. After all, you're also a goddess. What if I pull a shady contract on you? Ares said, if you go back on your word later, I won't take any responsibility. No need. Medusa bit her lower lip, then said, 3 days, please use these 3 days to save my followers. At least don't let all of them die in this place. All right, it's a deal. Ares's voice rose slightly, sounding somewhat pleased. Now it's time to establish the contract, beautiful lady. Please receive the magic I'm sending you, then repeat after me. Hearing Ares's words, Medusa was initially still a little worried, but to her surprise, the terms Ares offered remained unchanged, still so generous. The god of war would have the Spartans rescue her followers, the Pelasgians, and all she had to do was stay in Athena's temple and report to the god of war what Athena had done each day. Furthermore, the god of war would even provide for her personal safety, adding a clause to the contract himself that if Medusa was in trouble, she could directly summon him for help. It seemed as if this god of war was truly just doing all these things to find ways to disgust Athena. On the morning of the second day after the contract was signed, Medusa put on her priestess's attire and, shortly after arriving at Athena's temple, immediately saw the Athenian leader come to seek an audience with the goddess. Respected Athena. The Athenian leader bowed to Athena and said, the Spartans' commander came to me again. They said they wanted to discuss a business deal. Oh. Athena asked, what kind of business? They want to buy slaves. The Athenian leader replied, these Spartans seem to have taken a liking to the Pelasgians we captured. Chapter 102, Chapter 100 Prisoners of Certain Existence. Buying slaves. Athena glanced at Medusa upon hearing this. Other city-states are full of slaves, they're not rare. Why do those Spartans insist on buying them from us? Well. The leader of the Athenians seemed a bit troubled. Just speak directly. Yes. With Athena's approval, the leader of the Athenians cleared his throat before slowly saying, actually, last night, the Spartan commander brought a few Spartan warriors and sparred with our men. Just 5 of them managed to beat all our warriors guarding the slaves until they couldn't get up. Seeing this, the Spartan commander said that we Athenians were all weaklings, and if things continued like this, we might as well surrender directly when the Atlanteans arrived. Rather than letting those slaves go to waste, it would be better to sell them to the Spartans, let them train them, and then have them help us fight the Atlanteans. 5 people, and they knocked down all the guards of Athens' slave camp? I remember there were 300 warriors guarding the slave camp, right? Athena's tone was so steady that no fluctuations could be discerned, yet it sent shivers down the spine of the Athenian leader. He immediately knelt, pleading to Athena. Forgive me, goddess, it's all my fault for not training our warriors properly. I've shamed Athens in front of Sparta. Athena looked down at him, and after a long moment, she slowly said, get up. It's not your fault. Athens has only just been founded, and you are not battle-hardened warriors. It's normal to lack combat experience and not be able to defeat the Spartans. The leader of the Athenians stood up, walked directly to the side, humbly lowered his head, stood straight, not daring to utter a sound, while Athena propped her chin in her hand, deep in thought. Does Ares know about Medusa? But how does he know Medusa? The goddess's eyes flickered, but then she looked up and caught sight of the black bow hair ornament Medusa wore on the side of her hair. She paused, then asked. Medusa, why haven't I seen you wear that bow hair ornament on your head before? Medusa touched the hair ornament on her head, recalled what Ares had told her last night, and truthfully replied to Athena. Yesterday, I went to the slave camp to deliver food and met a newly captured slave. I gave him some food and water, and he gave me this relic of his mother in return. A slave? The goddess's gaze shifted to the leader of the Athenians, who quickly lowered his head and replied, Indeed, that happened. Yesterday, a barbarian was running outside the city and even stole our warriors' bows and arrows. Later, our men caught him and threw him into the slave camp. Is that so? Humph. Athena then beckoned to Medusa with a gentle expression. Medusa, come here. Medusa, as a priestess, walked obediently like a doll at the goddess's summons. Athena extended a finger, pinching Medusa's delicate and fair chin, making her lift her head slightly. With her other hand, she gently stroked Medusa's cheek, saying softly, My dear Medusa, from now on, you mustn't casually associate with any unsavory characters. I understand. A flicker of fear crossed Medusa's violet eyes as she whispered. Good girl. Athena smoothly stroked her hair, gently removed the headpiece she was wearing, and then lightly squeezed it. In a flash of golden light, the hair ornament instantly shattered into a pile of blue spiritual particles and vanished. Then, Athena withdrew her hands and coldly commanded. Have someone dispose of that slave. Yes. Also. Athena stopped the Athenian leader, who was about to carry out the order, and continued to instruct, those Spartans want to buy slaves, so let them buy them. However, this time, they cannot exchange gold or silver, but must exchange weapons and equipment, or manufacturing techniques. Your will. After finishing her day's work, Medusa returned home and stood by the window, watching several Athenians drag yesterday's slave out of the slave camp and pull him towards a forest outside the city. Compared to yesterday, this slave seemed very sluggish, as if the soul in his head had left his body, but even so, the Athenians did not slacken. After stabbing this slave to death with spears, they thoroughly cremated his body with a bonfire before returning to the city-state with peace of mind. Meanwhile, negotiations between the Spartans and the Athenians resumed. Sparta sent a staff officer, who was intensely discussing something with several elders in Athens. After a long time, both sides seemed to reach a compromise. The Spartans, with grim faces, received the Pelasgians from the slave camp guarded by the Athenians and settled them within their own encampment. After seeing her former people enter the protection zone of the Spartans, Medusa withdrew her gaze from the window. She walked back to her bed, knelt on it, folded her hands together in front of her chest, bowed her head slightly, and silently began to pray. However, she was not praying to Athena, the goddess of wisdom whom she currently served, but to another deity known for tyranny and fear. Her prayer was quickly answered. After connecting with her, Ares directly said to her, How is it? I didn't break my word, did I? Medusa affirmed, You truly are a god who keeps his promises, unlike the goddess. Humph, did Athena destroy your headpiece today, and then kill the slave who gave you the headpiece? Yes. Speaking of this topic, Medusa asked somewhat strangely, I don't understand why you deliberately exposed the connection between us. If I didn't wear that hair ornament and hid it, the goddess shouldn't have discovered it. Wouldn't discover it, that's impossible. Ares said, Understand this, you serve Athena, the goddess of wisdom. You've only been in Athens for a short time, and the Spartans I oversee are already trying to buy your followers from the Athenians. Do you think Athena wouldn't be suspicious? So, actively exposing it to her is actually a good thing. If you don't hide your hair ornament and even tell her how you got it, then she'll most likely only think that slave was my informant, and that you were passively accepting, being monitored by me. But if you hid the hair ornament and she discovered it, then she would certainly realize that I had colluded with you. Oh! Medusa was somewhat dazed after hearing this. So there's so much to it. You don't need to know so much about scheming. Just be a priestess with peace of mind, and pray to me if you have difficulties. Ares said, Athena is not an opponent you can deal with, and I estimate that even if I deliberately let her destroy that hair ornament, she will still suspect whether I have long colluded with you. The subsequent probing will probably not be few, so pay attention yourself. Remember, the more you say, the more mistakes you make. When she asks you questions, just nod or shake your head, and don't say anything. I understand. Medusa nodded. Tomorrow, the Atlanteans should be in the waters off Athens. As we discussed earlier, I will bring the Pelasgians and the Spartans to the front lines together. There will certainly be casualties, as freedom also has a price, but I can guarantee to minimize their casualties. Ares said at last. I understand. Medusa nodded. Thank you, god of war. No need to thank me. Ares said meaningfully, Medusa, after all, we are the same, we are both prisoners of certain existences. Chapter 103, Chapter 101 Your people are like a pack of wild dogs. The next morning, outside Athens, the Aegean Sea, which had been calm, suddenly became turbulent. The sun was obscured by dark clouds, and thunder and heavy rain fell from the sky, blocking the view from the Athenians' watchtowers. Amidst this storm, countless large ships, filled with Atlanteans, approached the coast of Athens, concealed by Poseidon. By the time the Athenians saw these terrifying ships approaching, they were already less than a few miles from Athens' coastline. The Athenian responsible for guarding the watchtower was startled and quickly tried to light a smoke signal to notify his companions in the city, but the heavy rain had drenched all the prepared wood, making it impossible to ignite. In this critical moment, the Athenian could only raise his horn and blow it with all his might, hoping the warriors in the city would hear the sound. But at that very moment, the storm in the sky grew louder, and the terrifying tempest immediately drowned out the sound of the horn. The Athenian's forehead was sweating with anxiety. He watched as countless small boats, full of warriors, disembarked from the Atlanteans' large ships and rowed towards the beach, preparing to land, yet Athens still appeared completely unprepared. However, just then, as if having seen through Poseidon's trick, the statue of Athena in the Parthenon, the tallest building in Athens, suddenly raised her aegis. Her shield glowed brightly, illuminating the entire coast like a searchlight, exposing the Atlanteans' fleet and leaving them nowhere to hide. Atlanteans! When did they arrive? They're already this close. Quick! Notify everyone, take up arms. Under the goddess's manifestation, the warriors in Athens finally saw the Atlanteans who had already reached the edge. They quickly blew their horns, picked up weapons purchased from Sparta, and went to the hastily built, crude city wall, ready for battle. Although these Athenians were all slaves who had escaped from their slave owners, they had never experienced taking up arms to resist foreign enemies. As mentioned before, warfare in the Greek world was a citizen's right, slaves were not allowed on the battlefield. The fact that they gained their freedom was mostly due to Athena's manifestation, making the slave owners give her face. Therefore, these Athenians were on their first campaign, and seeing the Atlanteans' splendid army, they felt some fear. However, despite their fear, there was a group of fearless people present. After seeing the Atlanteans' assault boats storm onto the beach, the Athenian leader, following Athena's instructions, winked at the Spartans' commander. The Spartans' commander, upon receiving this command, which was almost suicidal for the Spartans, showed no fear. He merely nodded calmly, then turned and walked outside the city, making his way into a forest on higher ground near the beach outside the city. Soon, the Atlanteans' vanguard completed their landing operation on Athens beach. This group of warriors, totaling about 500, were all clad in magnificent armor and wielded trident-like weapons similar to those of a sea king. They were also equipped with shields and fighting swords, appearing to possess significantly greater combat power than the Athenians. But just as they landed and before they could even fully form ranks, they heard a sudden shout from the forest above them. "For Sparta!" Accompanying a powerful shout from a man, the Atlanteans' vanguard looked up and were astonished to see a group of muscular men, wearing Spartan helmets and red cloaks, holding spears and round shields, leap directly from a height of nearly 8 meters vertically above the beach. They landed like meteors, and the moment they touched down, they had already stabbed to death the unfortunate Atlantean caught beneath their feet. Then, these Spartans pulled their spears from the bodies of their enemies and charged directly into the surrounding enemy forces, fearlessly. Their strength was astonishing. During combat, deep red magic patterns would appear on their bodies, with magical light flowing within them, turning into a blood-red aura that entwined around their weapons and shields. Moreover, these Spartans did not fear pain or blows. Their roars could unleash visible spherical sound waves, and their kicks could even shatter the breastbone of an armored Atlantean. Although this group of Spartans numbered only 150, in front of them, the Atlanteans' vanguard, with more than 3 times their numerical advantage, was instantly routed, throwing away their armor and disintegrating. As the Spartans slaughtered their enemies, their god, Ares, the master of war, also appeared on the cliff outside Athens. He thrust his spear into the center of the battlefield and then looked down at the Spartans bravely fighting, grinning happily and cheering repeatedly. "Excellent! Truly my Ares's people! That's it, kill your enemies! Let everyone tremble at your valor! For I shall be with you!" Ha! Hearing Ares's encouragement, the Spartans' morale surged. They let out terrifying shouts and fought even more ferociously. Some even broke their well-crafted spears and short swords, then threw their shields directly and began to perform hand-tearing Atlanteans for the Athenians on the battlefield. After a chaotic battle, the Atlanteans' vanguard completely retreated. The Atlantean royal commander who had led them was directly beheaded by the Spartans' officer. The Spartans' commander impaled the head with his spear, held it high, and then roared at the main Atlantean force. "Sparta will win! Sparta will win!" The Spartans, who were in fierce combat, quickly dealt with their opponents, then raised their weapons and shouted along with their commander. Seeing these seemingly splendid and invincible Atlanteans being slaughtered like dogs in front of the Spartans, the Athenians watching from the city wall gradually developed the idea that the Atlanteans are nothing special. They showed eager expressions, looking at their leader, their eyes filled with anticipation and desire for military merit. And this was precisely the effect Athena wanted to achieve, to eliminate the fear of combat from the hearts of these Athenians who had never been on a battlefield, so that the Athenians could truly stand up and no longer have to rely on people from other city-states. So, upon seeing her objective achieved, Athena also conveyed her command to her devout leader. Upon receiving the goddess's approval, the Athenians' leader waved his hand and said to his warriors, "Go!" Thus, the city gates opened, and a group of Athenians, cheering with weapons, rushed out like bandits, running to kill the retreating Atlanteans, wanting to snatch the Spartans' kills. Upon seeing the Athenians sally forth, the Spartans' commander also relayed orders to all the Spartans. Upon hearing their commander's orders, these Spartans all put away their weapons and watched indifferently as a group of Athenians ran past them, attacking the Atlanteans who were trying to push their assault boats back into the sea from the beach. Meanwhile, Ares sat on the cliff, watching these Athenians, slapping his thigh, and laughing uncontrollably. "Ha ha, Athena, look, your people look like a pack of wild dogs." Chapter 104, Chapter 102 Guerrilla Warfare of the Atlanteans. Although the Atlanteans seemed like chickens in front of the Spartans, the first generation of Athenians, with their combat prowess, actually couldn't defeat the Atlanteans head-on. No matter how corrupt Atlantis's army was said to be, this personal army of Poseidon's followers was not something that a group of Athenians, who had only recently escaped slavery and could barely wield swords and spears, could resist. Perhaps future Athenians could achieve it, but at this stage, the Athenians were truly the weaklings that Ares spoke of. However, a military defeat is like a landslide. The key to victory or defeat in a battle between ancient armies is not actually how many enemies are killed, but whether the enemy's morale can be broken. At this moment, the morale of the Atlanteans had been completely shattered by the 150 Spartans who descended from the sky. Even if the Athenians charged over and directly stabbed their asses with spears, these Atlanteans wouldn't bother to resist. They only wanted to quickly push their assault boats back into the water and get away from those more than 100 Spartans, who were as fierce as ghosts and gods. This landing battle was incredibly tragic for the Atlanteans. In the short period from the Spartans' aerial drop to the Athenians' all-out assault, out of the 500 men in their vanguard force responsible for the landing, only about 20 managed to escape back in assault boats. In contrast, those undisciplined Athenians only suffered a few dozen deaths, most of whom were killed by desperate Atlanteans fighting back because they charged too quickly. As for the Spartans who had utterly routed them, not a single one died. They coldly watched their defeated foes flee back into the sea, then walked back to their camp with proud postures, receiving praise from Ares, who was observing the battle from the cliff. Seeing the Atlanteans retreat, the Athenians on the beach raised their weapons and cheered for victory. However, before they could rejoice, they suddenly saw the sky change dramatically, and then a huge whirlpool slowly appeared in the middle of the sea. Following a violent earthquake, a brand new floating island slowly rose from the ocean and floated on the sea surface. This was certainly the work of Poseidon. After the island appeared, the Atlanteans also sailed their ships onto it. The Athenians stood by the sea, watching as the Atlanteans built fortifications and settled on the island. It seemed that the failure of this vanguard force was not a significant setback for them. The morale of the main Atlantean army did not appear to be affected. Moreover, the Athenians could not prevent these Atlanteans from stationing themselves on the island, because around the island, keen-eyed individuals had already spotted huge shadows swimming beneath the surface. Those were sea monsters driven by Poseidon, each one a lesser giant kraken. The Sea King's intention was clear. Zeus had strictly forbidden Athena, Poseidon, and other main gods from directly interfering in the war, but the sea monsters sent by Poseidon were merely patrolling his own territory. If the Athenians dared to set foot on his domain, Poseidon could directly command the sea monsters to attack the Athenians' ships. Furthermore, at present, the Athenians couldn't build any large ships. At best, they could go to the nearby forest, cut down some trees, and hollow out the trunks to make some canoes, which might not even be as effective as the assault boats the Atlanteans used for beaching. Not to mention the kraken in the sea, their boats were mere chickens in front of the Atlantean fleet. Athena clearly knew this, so soon, an order from the Athenian leader came from the direction of Athens, calling these Athenians back. Both sides sounded the retreat, tacitly confronting each other across an ocean. Sage, it's just as you predicted. On the floating island of Atlantis, one of the 10 kings of Atlantis, the commander of the Atlantean army, looked at an elder in a white robe with green fish scales on his neck, with an expression of admiration. This elder was the wisest elder in the city of Atlantis, and he had lived from the very beginning of Atlantis's establishment until now. He was Poseidon's subject, and also a sea creature sent by the sea god to assist his son. Throughout the reigns of the 10 kings, no matter what difficulties arose, they would usually seek the sage's counsel, and his words carried the same weight as those of the 10 kings within Atlantis. Upon hearing the Atlantean commander's words, the ancient sea creature, who had been closing his eyes, slowly opened them, revealing a pair of dull, fish-like eyes. His eyeballs rotated, then focused on the commander in front of him, and he sighed. "King, I actually think it would be better if this matter didn't turn out as I predicted. He looked at the distant coastline, pointing to the wooded area where the Spartans had landed, and said, "Those people are called Spartans. They are followers of Ares, and possess almost the strongest combat capability in the entire world. You must have seen what they did to our people on land. If we don't eliminate them, our fleet will not be able to land at all." "They are only 150 people," the Atlantean commander said after a moment of contemplation. "In my opinion, Athens' greatest reliance is this group of Spartans. If we charge the beach with the rest of our main force and sacrifice ourselves to take out these 150 Spartans on the beach, then our compatriots should be able to fight 5 Athenians each." "That's not possible, King," the sage said with some helplessness. "Atlantis has not experienced war for too long. You are taking things for granted. Think from another perspective. If your superior ordered you to sacrifice your life for the lives of 150 Spartans, would you be willing?" "This." The Atlantean commander was a bit embarrassed. He had been one of the 10 kings of Atlantis since birth, and indeed, no country had been foolish enough to cause trouble for Atlantis, so they truly had no combat experience. This time, he was appointed commander on the eve of battle. "Morale will collapse. Our army is far from reaching the level of a suicide squad," the sage's ancient voice slowly said. "I wonder if you noticed, our vanguard force began to rout after only a few dozen men were cut down by those Spartans. This is unavoidable." "Then what do you think should be done, sage?" the Atlantean commander retorted. "Delay," the sage said. "Utilize our warship advantage and numerical superiority. Every day, send a group of people to harass the Athenians on the coastline, shooting arrows and spears at the walls of Athens. Kill as many of them as possible. If the main Athenian army and the Spartans come, we immediately use the speed of our ships to escape." "Can this really work?" the Atlantean commander asked doubtfully. "Although we have the support of our father god and don't have to worry about supplies, the Athenians should also have a goddess. Did you see the deity standing on the cliff?" The sage pointed to the cliff. The Atlantean commander looked over and noticed the majestic deity still seated on the cliff, not yet departed. "That is Ares. He is the god of the Spartans. Spartans are not Athenians, they are merely mercenaries who work for money. Athens has just been established and should not have much funding. We only need to delay until the Spartans leave, and we can win this war." Chapter 105, Chapter 103 Poseidon is anxious. "Goddess, those Atlanteans came again this morning." Inside the Parthenon, the leader of the Athenians reported to Athena, who was looking up at her statue, with a helpless expression. "What's the damage?" Athena asked without turning her head. "There wasn't much damage. 2 of our warriors were unlucky enough to be speared to death by the Atlanteans' javelins. Those Atlanteans even tried to use ladders to climb directly onto the city wall from the sea today, but then the Spartans showed up, and they sailed away," the leader of the Athenians said with a hint of envy. Athena said after listening. "Indeed, it's not much of a loss. There's one more thing." The leader of the Athenians' tone became heavy as he spoke of this. "Those Spartans have started asking us for their commission. They said their employment period is almost up, and we either renew their contract or they'll leave with the slaves." Athena thought for a moment and said, "Yes, calculating the time, it should be about right. Go call the Spartans' commander over and tell him what I've instructed." "King, sage, our scouts report that the Spartans seem to have left." Inside the Atlanteans' main camp, an Atlantean general reported to their commander and sage. "Is the news true?" the Atlantean commander asked. "It should be true," the Atlantean general replied. "Because the Athenians have started building fortifications on the beach. They seem to be preparing to directly repel our ships from the beach." The Atlantean commander immediately looked at their sage. "Sage, what do you think?" "Wait 2 more days," the Atlantean sage said without hesitation. "The Athenians are followers of the goddess of wisdom. We cannot be certain whether the Spartans have truly left or if they are acting with the Athenians to deceive us. All right then. The Atlantean leader raised his hand and ordered. Then listen to the sage and wait a few more days. However, while the Atlanteans wanted to continue with guerrilla tactics and wait a few more days to observe the situation, some people couldn't sit still. Ares' divine avatar, who had been squatting on the cliffs of Athens for several days, finally became enraged at the opportune moment when he saw the Atlantean fleet not daring to charge even when facing a group of Athenians who came to build fortifications. Damn it, you're all dogs! The god of war stomped his feet on the cliff, pointing at the Atlanteans who were throwing javelins and shooting arrows, harassing the Athenians, and cursed. 2,500 men against 100 craftsmen, and you don't even dare to charge? What kind of war are you fighting? Go back to Poseidon's embrace and nurse. I think this Poseidon is a coward, damn it, he's a coward, and the followers he teaches are also cowards. Look at yourselves, every single one of you is so timid, you don't even have the guts to cut people down, and you claim to be followers of the sea god? Hey? Do you want me to teach you how to cut people down? Ares cursed both Poseidon and the Atlanteans in one go. Poseidon clearly heard Ares' insolence. After he finished cursing, dark clouds gathered in the sky, and a storm enveloped the beach. The low-hanging clouds showed the Sea King's rage. Damn you, you're getting angry at me now. However, the god of war did not back down. He pulled out his flame sword and directly unleashed a terrifying wave of fire. This wave of fire split the dark clouds in the sky in two, revealing the clear sky once more. The sea god's power was completely gone at that moment. Then the god of war continued to curse the Atlanteans on this cliff, using foul language like bastards and born without a father's upbringing, growing more and more offensive with each curse. But the Atlanteans dared not do anything to him. If someone had truly lost their temper and accidentally thrown a spear or shot an arrow at this god of war, it would have been over. Atlantis would have faced a main Olympus god-level boss intruding on the battlefield. Although Zeus explicitly stipulated that main gods were not allowed to intervene in this war, it did not mean that if main gods were accidentally injured by mortals while observing the war, they could not inflict divine punishment on the mortals. Poseidon was clearly also mindful of this point and likewise dared not attack Ares. If Ares had been alone cursing here, his second uncle would probably have already wrestled him into the sea. But in the temple next to him, Athena, the strongest main god among the fourth-generation gods, was also present. Ares and Athena, these siblings who controlled war, were the two most formidable fighters among the fourth-generation gods. If he could deal with one, it would be fine, but if he had to face both Ares and Athena simultaneously, and Poseidon could still defeat them, he would have rebelled long ago. So, there was no choice. Faced with the god of war's insults, the sea god also chose to swallow his anger, adopting the mindset of not bothering with a fool for now. However, Poseidon secretly gave orders to the Atlantean army. Can you speed it up? After receiving the divine oracle, the Atlantean commander looked at his sage with a troubled expression. Sage, Father God has given a divine oracle, we can no longer delay. Alas, at this time, improper, very improper. The sage sighed, but ultimately could not change anything. For Poseidon, his face was far more important than the lives of the Atlanteans. The Atlantean sage was clearly aware of this, so he merely lamented but did not object, only saying, "At least the attack must be tonight. We will directly launch a sneak attack on the Athenians' encampment. We don't need to capture Athens tonight, we will just seize the resources they have in the encampment, and they will naturally collapse." Good. The 10 kings of Atlantis still held this much power, so the commander directly ordered, "Pass on my command, dinner will be postponed tonight. At midnight, all warriors will mobilize to attack the Athenians' encampment." Time flew by in a flash. In the blink of an eye, Selene had already driven her chariot to the highest point of the night sky. As the moon god diligently performed her duties, she noticed a cloud on the ground obstructing her light, but Selene pretended not to see it. As an Olympus god, she naturally knew what was happening there. And beneath the dark clouds, outside the Athenians' unfinished encampment, on the vast, dark sea, the Atlantean fleet silently moved into the nearshore of Athens. Their warships anchored in the deep water, and then, apart from the necessary sailors remaining on board, all other Atlantean warriors, gripping their weapons, boarded the assault boats. Propelled by the waves, these Atlanteans quietly rushed onto the beach. The two Athenian warriors patrolling the encampment entrance with torches were silently killed by 2 arrows before they could even react. In the darkness, large numbers of Atlanteans surged into the unfinished encampment, continuously taking the lives of the Athenians within. However, their numbers were vast, and even with Poseidon's cover, they ultimately could not remain hidden. Actually, it was mainly a certain god of war squatting on the nearby cliff who, upon seeing the Atlanteans charging the beach, couldn't help but slap his thigh and shout with a joyful smile. "Oh, you finally figured it out, not being cowards anymore." His voice was loud, like a crowing rooster to the Athenians. In an instant, all the Athenians resting in the encampment were startled awake by Ares' voice. "Damn it!" The Atlantean commander felt grief and indignation in his heart, but he could only suppress his anger. He raised his weapon and, with the aim of intimidating the enemy, shouted loudly, "All troops, charge!" Chapter 106, Chapter 104. The fierce battle on the beach lasted only half an hour before it ended. The Atlanteans had the advantage of a surprise attack, and their combat capabilities were already superior to the Athenians. With the right timing, favorable terrain, and unity, it was difficult for the Atlanteans to lose. The Athenians responsible for guarding this camp quickly abandoned it and fled back to Athens. The Atlanteans did not pursue them, instead, following the wise man's instructions, they moved all the supplies left by the Athenians in the camp onto their ships, then set the camp on fire, and sailed away. Before leaving, they even deliberately sailed close to Athens and brazenly mocked the Athenians. This was mainly done to help Poseidon vent his anger. That morning, Poseidon was verbally abused by Ares and couldn't retort. By nightfall, the sea god finally unleashed his wrath upon his niece. Ares, squatting on the cliff, watched the victorious Atlanteans depart and revealed a happy smile. Everyone else thought he was smiling because a fierce battle had finally broken out, but only Ares and Athena knew what had truly happened. "Atlantis, oh Atlantis!" Gazing at the distant ships, Ares softly said. "Still too green." By the time the Atlantean fleet returned to their floating island base, it was already close to the latter half of the night. However, the Atlantean warriors were not sleepy. The exhilarating battle they had just fought had made them even more energetic. Moreover, this was the Atlanteans' first victory since they launched their attack on Athens, and the Atlantean warriors greatly relieved the resentment and fear they had accumulated from being slaughtered by the Spartans. "Everyone!" The Atlantean commander, who had personally led the army and returned victorious, emerged from his tent shortly after entering. He raised his arm and announced to the Atlantean warriors, "Today was a refreshing victory, and the sea god is greatly pleased. We have received the sea god's commendation. Tonight, the sea race will bring us delicious food and wine. Let everyone relax and drink to their heart's content." "Oh oh!" The Atlantean warriors cheered. Indeed, not long after the Atlantean commander announced the news, sea creatures and mermaids soon arrived around the floating island, bringing a large amount of fine wine and seafood to the Atlanteans. Among them, beautiful mermaid dancers leaped onto the floating island, their fish tails transforming into shapely long legs. They then came to the Atlanteans' main camp to pour wine, sing, and dance for the brave Atlantean warriors, and even spend a night of passion with the warriors there. With the appearance of these mermaid dancers, the Atlantean celebration reached its climax, and the entire Atlantean floating island was enveloped in a festive atmosphere. However, in a corner of this lively banquet, 2 Atlantean warriors were surprised to see their comrade, who was responsible for guarding the Athenian supplies, run out of the large tent where the supplies were stored, his face full of shock and doubt. "Lorien," they called out their comrade's name, "where are you going? You volunteered to guard the supplies earlier, wanting to make a good impression on the king and the wise man. Now that you've seen those mermaids, you finally can't resist, can you? After all, they are mermaids. Such beauties, you might never get to touch one in your life." The two Atlanteans exchanged glances, revealing expressions that all men understood, then burst into laughter and raised their cups. Thanks to the sea god's generosity. Their cups clinked, and they gulped down the wine in one go. The two warriors let out satisfied burps, then waved to Lorien, who had been guarding the supplies earlier. Come on, you're out anyway, come have a drink, Lorien." Lorien walked over uneasily, sat down beside his two comrades, took the cup one of them offered, and holding it, asked. "Don't you think this batch of supplies is a bit strange?" "What's so strange about it?" one of the Atlanteans retorted. "We usually use boxes to pack supplies, right?" Lorien looked at the golden wine in his cup. "But why do the Athenians use these large wooden barrels for everything? Maybe it's just different national customs." His comrade said indifferently. "Our Atlantis is a nation founded by the great sea god himself. Do you really think that all city-states and nations in the world have the same treatment as our Atlantis? But, when I was guarding just now, I seemed to see those wooden barrels moving," Lorien said somewhat uneasily. "You must have seen wrong." His two comrades patted his back, laughing heartily. "You're probably too tired. Drink some wine, eat something, and then find a mermaid beauty for a night of pleasure, and everything will be fine. Perhaps I should go explain this situation to the wise man or the king." Lorien mumbled softly. "Explain what? Don't bother those two with every little thing, okay," his comrade scolded. "I just saw the commander enter the tent with that leading mermaid dancer. If you go find him now, aren't you looking for death? Drink, drink. Don't think about those useless things." Lorien thought about it and decided he could only continue to sit there. After all, if he were to disturb the royal family's good time, he would truly be cut down by their commander's sword. So he raised his cup, preparing to drink as his two comrades suggested, and then later see if he could find a romantic encounter. However, just as his lips touched the surface of the wine, he suddenly heard a faint but distinct sound. Thump thump. Ah! Lorien was already scared, so upon hearing this sound, he was so startled that he immediately stood up. "What are you doing? Being so jumpy?" His two drunken comrades looked at him, their eyes filled with displeasure. "I'm not drinking anymore. Our supplies are moving." Lorien was about to go report to the wise man and the commander, but remembering what his comrade had just said, he abruptly stopped. "I'll go into the tent and see what's really inside those wooden barrels." With that, he put down his cup, picked up a short sword, and walked into the tent where the supplies were stored. Sigh, what a coward! His two comrades turned their heads away in disdain. Come on, forget about him. Let's keep drinking." However, just as they raised their cups again, suddenly, two dark figures shot out directly from the tent where the Athenian supplies were stored. The two Atlantean warriors, with their backs to the tent, did not notice this. When the two dark figures pierced their necks from behind, the two Atlanteans still had drunken smiles on their faces. Their necks were pierced by two sharp spears, and then their souls were silently taken away by Thanatos to Hades' domain. With two thuds, the bodies of the two Atlanteans fell to the ground. Shortly after, a headless corpse was thrown out of the tent, and then, from inside the tent, a group of muscular men in Spartan helmets emerged first. Two of them walked to the two bodies, then reached out and pulled out the spears that had killed the two Atlanteans. The leading commander then turned his head and said to those inside the tent, "All right, then, as we told you earlier, start performing." For every Atlantean you kill on the battlefield, one of your compatriots will gain the rights of a Spartan citizen. Begin." As his voice fell, a cold wind blew, lifting the curtain of the large tent and revealing the scene inside. Inside the dark tent, besides the Spartan warriors, there stood a group of people wearing armor and carrying swords and shields. They all bore the marks of slaves. They were the Pelasgians, slaves purchased by the Spartans from the Athenians, and followers of the Gorgon sisters. Chapter 107, Chapter 105. Don't be afraid, there are only 150 of them. Tonight was destined to become a lifelong nightmare for many Atlanteans. In the first half of the night, they successfully ambushed the Athenians' encampment, causing the Athenians to suffer a crushing defeat and securing a resounding victory. Poseidon himself praised their military achievements, even sending fine wine, delicious food, and beautiful women to host a celebration feast for them. In the latter half of the night, as their celebration feast was in full swing, with most of them drunk and many Atlanteans even having slipped into tents with the mermaid dancers, all Atlanteans suddenly heard a terrifying roar. For Sparta! This roar echoed through the night sky, as if a group of terrifying giants from the depths of Tartarus were attacking. Upon hearing this sound, many Atlanteans who were still somewhat sober were startled awake, and those friends who were busy trembled with fright. If they were to survive, they might develop some unspeakable ailments. Accompanying this roar, the Atlanteans saw a group of Spartan tough men, clad in crimson cloaks and wielding long spears and round shields, charge out from the area where they stored the Athenians' supplies. They attacked all living beings indiscriminately along their path, whether Atlanteans, sea creatures, or merfolk. In an instant, countless lives were lost and wounded before these rabid dogs of Ares. Hearing the commotion, the Atlantean commander, who was discussing a multi-million business deal with the leader of the mermaid dancers, also rushed out. He didn't even have time to put on his armor, only wearing his underwear. Seeing the crimson-cloaked warriors freely slaughtering and mercilessly taking lives with their spears at the feast, the Atlantean commander was utterly stunned. Spartans? Why? However, there was no time for him to ponder. The Atlantean leader quickly raised his sword and loudly organized the Atlanteans, who were already in disarray. Do not be afraid. Children of Poseidon, there are only 150 of them. Pick up your weapons and send them to Hades. Hearing his voice, the panicking Atlanteans seemed to find their backbone. Finally, some of them began to pick up their weapons, attempting to resist these ferocious Spartans. However, cruel facts followed. Just after the Atlantean commanders finished shouting, "There are only 150 of them," a large group of people suddenly rushed out from the Athenian supply depot. Although they were not Spartans, their eyes were fierce and full of fighting spirit, and their numbers probably totaled 400 or 500. These people, wearing armor and wielding swords, followed behind the Spartans and quickly joined the battle, causing the Atlanteans to be thrown into chaos. Although their fighting skills were far less refined than the Spartans, they exuded an aura of fearlessness. The Atlanteans saw more than once someone, even after being stabbed multiple times in the chest, desperately bringing their sword down on the head of an enemy in front of them. Seeing these wolf-like enemies charging, the Atlanteans, who had not yet completed their formation, were utterly unable to resist. In the end, only a few warriors managed to arm themselves fully and followed behind the Atlantean commander, desperately trying to delay the Spartans and Pelasgians, buying time for their allies who hadn't yet grasped the situation. Unfortunately, during this process, the Atlantean commander was targeted by the Spartan commander. Whoosh! Spartans are not verbose, and this was a battlefield. The Spartan would certainly not kindly remind the Atlantean commander to be careful. The Atlantean commander was entangled with a Pelasgian, wielding his trident. Just as he was about to slay this Pelasgian, a fierce wind, accompanied by a whooshing sound, attacked him from behind. The Atlantean commander only had time to quickly turn and horizontally hold his trident in front of his chest before he felt a tremendous force strike his trident. That was a spear. The most terrifying aspect of the Spartans, created by Ares himself in the Age of Gods, was that their strength was enough to arm wrestle with giants. Others' long weapons were made of wood, with only the sharp tip made of metal, but their spears, like Ares, were entirely forged from heavy bronze. Yet, despite being such heavy weapons, these Spartans could wield and throw them with ease. Perhaps the bloodline of Poseidon played a role. In the instant the Atlantean commander turned, in his peripheral vision, his dynamic vision clearly captured that the Spartan's descending spear was already slightly bent. Such power was naturally beyond the resistance of someone like him, whose divine blood had been diluted through countless generations and was almost gone. With a crisp snap, the trident in the Atlantean commander's hand was directly split in half. Fortunately, he quickly rolled on the ground, thereby avoiding the spear tip and not meeting the same fate as his trident. Had Ares found a bunch of demigods to be his subjects from somewhere? While rolling on the ground, the Atlantean commander thought in despair. However, his emergency measure did not salvage his dire situation. Instead, it plunged him into an even more terrifying predicament. Seeing the Atlantean commander perform a desperate roll, the Spartan commander also silently took countermeasures. He slightly lifted his foot, then stomped heavily on the ground. With a dull thud, the ground directly cracked with spider-web-like fissures. Crimson magic spread along these cracks, then transformed into a magical light, erupting and scorching the Atlantean commander's back. Ah! He only managed to let out a scream before his entire body was jolted into the air by the magical light. Then, the Spartan commander lifted his leg again, kicking his body upright, while deftly changing his grip on the spear, maintaining a throwing posture. The Spartan commander forcefully hurled his spear towards the Atlantean commander, who was in midair and had nowhere to dodge. Pfft! The spear easily pierced through the Atlantean commander's chest. The immense force carried him forward, then impaled him onto a wooden stake within the encampment, producing a dull thud sound. Your commander is dead. Atlanteans. After successfully slaying the enemy leader, the Spartan commander let out a deafening roar. Who else isn't afraid to die? Come forward. Hearing his words, and seeing their commander, one of the 10 kings, impaled on the stake with his eyes still open in death, the Atlanteans' morale instantly collapsed. The formation they had painstakingly put together disintegrated in that very instant. Chapter 108, Chapter 106. The battle continued until dawn. When the goddess of dawn Eos pushed open the golden gates of Olympus with her rosy fingers, releasing Helios's chariot, all the Atlanteans on this floating island who dared to resist the Spartans and Pelasgians had already become corpses lying on the ground. The remaining Atlanteans consciously tied themselves up, then sat together, waiting for the Spartans to deal with them, either taking them back to Sparta as slaves or selling them directly to other city-states. But no matter what, it was better than dying directly. The war ended, and the overall situation was settled. Above the clouds, Athena and Poseidon stood facing each other on the same white cloud. It seems our war has a result. Athena smiled and said to her second uncle, whose face was as gloomy as water. This time, you lost again, Poseidon. Damn it! Poseidon angrily gripped his trident, his emotions making the entire sea turbulent. But just as he was about to erupt, Zeus's voice came from above the sky. Poseidon, honor your bet. This time, Athena and you competed fairly. If you want to blame someone, blame your Atlanteans for being too fragile. Humph! Poseidon gritted his teeth and stared at Athena from the cloud for a long time, but finally turned and left, throwing down a remark before he departed. Athena, don't think this is the end. We still have plenty of time in the future. Athena, however, smiled slightly and bowed very gracefully to Poseidon. Always at your service. Poseidon had been rebuffed by the goddess of wisdom and the king of gods, and he harbored a surge of anger. When he descended to the sea surface and saw the Spartans and Pelasgians on that floating island, who had annihilated his Atlanteans and were now counting their spoils, his fury intensified. A bunch of insects. He raised his trident, intending to summon the power of the sea to crush these wastes who had profaned his glory. But just as he raised his weapon, a rough voice suddenly sounded behind him. "Second uncle, do you intend to strike my people?" Poseidon turned around and saw his dear second nephew, Ares, standing behind him, looking at him coldly, his eyes full of fighting spirit. The god of war was clearly prepared, he was fully armored and laden with his weapons. If Poseidon intended to attack the Spartans, Ares would likely fight the god of the sea on the spot. "Ares, don't forget where this is." Poseidon looked around. Beneath their feet was a vast expanse of blue waves. This was his, Poseidon's, vast sea territory. So what? A true warrior doesn't choose the battlefield. He should be able to exert his full combat power in all terrains and environments. Ares looked up at the sky, then gazed at Poseidon and said, "Besides, second uncle, you just fought Athena. Are you sure you still want to fight me? I don't mind." With that, he even drew his spear directly, adopting a combat stance, his face full of eagerness. "Come on, second uncle, if you've got the guts, take me down head-on." Poseidon snorted, striking his trident heavily on the sea surface. The floating island carrying the Atlantean main camp immediately began to shake violently. Amidst the earth-shattering tremors, the entire floating island resubmerged into the sea, disappearing from sight. The Spartans, Pelasgians, and Atlantean prisoners of war who were originally on it all plunged into the water with splashes. Most critically, a group of krakens were swimming around them. These sea monsters opened their tooth-filled mouths, sucking in the corpses of the Atlanteans killed by the Spartans and Pelasgians from the seawater, chewing and swallowing them. As they fed, they eyed the living people with ill intent. However, just as the sea monsters were showing their might, a voice suddenly came from the side, with a hint of surprise. "Oh, there's such a big squid here? I love roasted squid." Hearing this voice, the Spartans in the sea showed joy. It's the god of war. And those originally fierce krakens were so scared that they didn't even bother to eat the remaining corpses. They turned their heads and dived into the deep sea, fearing that the god of war would spear them with his long spear and drag them home to cook. Ares manifested himself before these mortals. Then, with a wave of his spear, the Atlantean blood on the sea surface ignited. From these flames, several huge warships sailed out, stopping before the Spartans and Pelasgians. Gangways automatically lowered from the ship's edge into the water. "Well done this time. This is your reward." Ares turned his head and found that the Sea King had long since vanished. So he said, "Take these Atlanteans back as well. Also, from now on, the Pelasgians will settle in Sparta, and they will be treated as Spartan citizens in every respect." "Yes, your will." With Ares's help, the Spartans and Pelasgians, along with the Atlantean prisoners of war, boarded the warships. Then Ares gently pushed with magic, propelling the warship away from there, carrying them directly towards Sparta. As he made all these moves, above the clouds, Zeus and Athena observed everything. Zeus stroked his chin and asked his daughter with some doubt, "Athena, do you feel that Ares seems to have changed a little recently?" "What changes?" Athena smiled, but there was little joy in it. "To me, he's still as annoying as ever." You have to understand, Ares has always had that personality, stubborn as a mule." Zeus casually appeased his daughter, then continued to muse to himself. "Let me think, I always feel that Ares has become more aggressive lately. Although on Olympus, he used to often contradict others, it was never as intense as it is now. Did he and other main gods ever come close to fighting like today before?" "Of course," Athena said without hesitation. "Didn't he and I already fight?" "True." Recalling the duel between Ares and Athena when she was just born, Zeus's face showed a hint of emotion. He thought for a moment, then said, "Never mind, it might just be my imagination." On the boundless ocean, Propelled by a strong wind gifted by Ares, the Spartans' warships swiftly sailed over the waves, leaving Athens and Atlantis far behind. The Spartan commander of this battle stood at the bow of the first warship, gazing at the waves before him, but there was no joy of victory in his eyes. Instead, he was lost in thought. Seeing this, his staff officer walked over and asked, "Commander, is something on your mind?" "Yes." Hearing his staff officer's call, the Spartan commander came back to his senses. Then, he tapped his spear on the deck and, looking out at the sky, said with a tone of emotion, "The high priest always reminded us that although we Spartans are brave, we should not ignore the role of strategy, because the god of war's military strategy divine office was cunningly divided by the heavenly gods. Therefore, we Spartans lack strategy, and the god of war's oracle has always reminded us to seize every opportunity to learn military strategies from others. But I used to think that with our Spartan strength, any strategy could be crushed by valor, until today." "You mean?" The staff officer thought for a moment, then said, "The strategy where the Athenians had us hide in wooden barrels, disguised as supplies." "Yes." The Spartan commander said, "Think about it. Today Atlantis was greatly defeated by us because the battlefield was on their floating island. But if the battlefield were on the open sea, with sea monsters assisting and Atlantis's huge warships as support, even if we could win, how many brothers would we have to sacrifice?" "Indeed." The staff officer replied after some thought, "Not all of our warriors have mastered the god of war's secret techniques after all. With those sea monsters, it's possible our entire army could be wiped out." "Exactly, that's the role of military strategy. I've learned it." The Spartan commander ordered, "So record the Athenian scheme from today. In the future, if we encounter such an impregnable city, we will use this method to confront them." Chapter 109, Chapter 107 million Argentine pesos. Lord of armies. It was naturally impossible for Poseidon to conceal the news of the Atlanteans' defeat, so the news quickly spread back to Atlantis, along with the sea god's punishment. Within just a few days, many people mysteriously disappeared from all three social strata of Atlantis, and even 3 of the remaining 9 kings were replaced. However, the wrath of the sea god Poseidon was mainly directed at the cleansing of the upper and middle classes and had little to do with the common people of the lower class. Moreover, the sea god's wrath came and went quickly. After the royal family selected a beautiful princess to be offered as a sacrifice, Poseidon's anger quickly subsided. For the lower class people of Atlantis, what was truly important was the prophecy that the bards had spoken in the taverns a while ago. Although at the time, no one took seriously what he said about angels and demons, their prophecy had now come true. Atlantis, which had the protection of the sea god and the strongest fleet in the world, actually lost a war to a group of slaves who had just been freed from their masters. Even with the help of those 150 Spartans, such a thing was unbelievable to the Atlanteans, who were accustomed to pride. Thus, the people living in the lower class couldn't help but begin to ponder the truthfulness of what the bards had said. Could it be that it was all true? These Atlantean commoners discussed in groups of 3 or 5 during their leisure time from work. If Poseidon is truly a god, then why was our army, which he protects, defeated by others? The rapid spread of these rumors was actually Poseidon's own undoing. He had always harbored a dream of he can take his place regarding his brother. Therefore, in Atlantis, his own reserved territory where no other gods could interfere, Poseidon's propaganda of his faith was much more rampant than in the outside world. In the myths circulated among the Atlanteans, Poseidon was practically the king of the gods. When he went out, Zeus and Hades had to show him respect, Ares and Apollo had to pull his chariot, Hephaestus had to carefully forge for him, and every so often, he would present his works to please him. As for the beautiful goddesses on Olympus, they were more like Poseidon's 3,000 concubines. Whether it was Hera or Demeter, compared to their original husband Zeus, they seemed to favor Poseidon more in their hearts. Some Atlantean myths even explicitly stated that these 2 goddesses were Poseidon's favored concubines, and that Poseidon would share a bed with them, while Zeus, as their husband, could only squat at the door, keeping watch for them while shedding tears in the wind. In short, the sea god myths circulating in Atlantis were a collection of Poseidon's fantasies. In these myths, he had become an omnipotent, omniscient, and ever-present supreme heavenly god. But now, his bluff had been mercilessly exposed by Ares and Athena. When faith collapsed, a storm of doubt followed. For a time, the entire lower stratum of Atlantis was shrouded in gossip. In every street and alley, any Atlantean who had been to a tavern and heard the bard's prophecies gathered together, whispering and observing the nobles and royalty who came to the lower class with strange looks. Of course, they haven't caused a riot yet, because they are still waiting for the Spartan bards to come out and make an official explanation. Sigh, that Ares fellow is getting more and more arrogant lately. He keeps throwing these troublesome matters to me. Does he even understand who the teacher is? Within the underworld, moon goddess Hecate sat on a soft chair in her magic workshop, gazing at the mid-air in front of her. There were countless light screens formed by condensed magic, displaying various scenes within Atlantis. When she saw that rumors about angels had begun to circulate in the streets and alleys of the lower class of Atlantis, Hecate cleared her throat, then looked behind her and instructed. "You may proceed." After her words fell, behind Hecate, 4 tall mechanical deities, 5 or 6 meters in height, slowly raised their heads. Accompanied by a humming, heavy sound, the magic furnaces within their bodies activated, and red light emanated from the eyes of these mechanical gods. Subsequently, a pair of huge steel wings unfolded behind them. At that instant, it seemed as if countless intricate circuit-like magic patterns spread out from their wings, extending throughout the entire world. At the same time, the Spartan bards, who had received instructions from Ares, also set out again. In the evening, they went to the taverns they had visited before to begin the next phase of their plan. They first played a few tunes, deliberately teasing the Atlantean commoners' appetites. Once these people began to impatiently urge them to quickly speak about the angels, the bards deliberately acted a bit reluctant and demanded that these commoners keep it a secret. Then, they cleared their throats and began to slowly narrate, accompanied by the sound of their instruments. "Do you know which angels caused Poseidon's defeat this time?" The Atlantean commoners shook their heads in cooperation. "No. There were a total of 4 angels who came this time." The bard gently plucked the strings, his voice melodious. "The first angel is named Conquest. He wears a crown and holds a longbow. He is accompanied by a white horse. When he comes among the Athenians and Spartans, the Spartans and Athenians will be victorious again and again. The second angel is named War. God granted him authority and gave him a great sword. He rides a red steed and can take peace from the world, causing people to kill each other. When he came to the earth, the war between Atlantis and Athens began. The third angel is named Famine. He rides a black horse and holds a balance in his hand. When he came to the earth, the food of the Atlanteans was taken away, the soldiers were terrified, and their morale collapsed for 1,000 miles. Next, is the fourth angel." At this point, the bard paused to catch his breath before continuing. "This angel has a green horse, named Death. He is the leader among these 4 angels, and Hades follows him. Therefore, he has divinely bestowed authority to take the lives of the Atlanteans with the sword, famine, plague, and wild beasts." Oh, after listening to the bard, the Atlanteans present gasped, and then someone else asked. "Then who is the god? Which god sent the 4 angels this time to defeat the demon Poseidon?" "God is God. He is omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, and no adjective can describe him." The bard stopped playing his instrument, thought quietly for a moment, and then said, "However, if you wish to revere him, you may call him Lord of Armies, Mars." Chapter 110, Chapter 108 Respect him and you will be spared death. Upon hearing the title Lord of Armies Mars, the Atlanteans all showed expressions of admiration, exclaiming that the title was extraordinary and far superior to that of Poseidon, god of the sea. Seeing their reactions, Hecate, who was in the underworld, couldn't help but reveal an approving expression. Where did this kid get such an awesome title? Mars never had a title like Lord of Armies before. The original god of war had already been torn apart by hand when Yuxing Vanguard No. 2 descended upon Earth, and his divinity was shattered and scattered across the world. It could be said that the current Ares also contained a part of the original god of war Mars's divinity within him. Of course, it was no problem for Ares to casually usurp his title. After all, Mars was thoroughly dead. Even if Ares urinated on his grave, it was unlikely Mars would crawl out to settle accounts with Ares. Meanwhile, in a tavern in Atlantis, the bard from Sparta also noticed that the Atlanteans' faces only showed admiration, with no other emotions, as if it was none of their business. They seemed to believe that whether Atlantis won or lost, and whether Poseidon was a god or a demon, it had nothing to do with them. Upon noticing this, the bard subtly frowned. It seems the impact isn't strong enough yet. These bards from Sparta had been personally trained by the high priest since childhood. On the surface, they were propagandists in Sparta, used to promote their city-state, heroic stories, and deities. In reality, all bards originating from Sparta were professional instigators, provocateurs, and agitators, skilled at stirring up trouble and sowing discord. So, upon noticing that these Atlanteans didn't take his words seriously at all, the bard from Sparta felt his professional integrity challenged and immediately brought out his subsequent measures. He gently plucked a string, using the sound to halt the Atlanteans' discussions. When everyone's attention was drawn to him, the bard cleared his throat and asked, "If I'm not mistaken, you still believe these matters have nothing to do with you, right? Isn't that so?" The Atlanteans cried out. "Matters concerning Poseidon and Lord of Armies Mars are beyond the purview of even the noble lords. Only the royal family living in the deepest parts of Atlantis has the right to know these things. What good would it do us to know? Can we influence Poseidon, or directly contact Lord of Armies Mars? You are truly foolish. Utterly foolish." The bard feigned an expression of disappointment, looking at the Atlanteans and saying, "Think carefully with your alcohol-soaked brains, Poseidon's army has been defeated. Where will the next blow fall? Of course, it will be the entire Atlantis. To the Lord of Armies, this is a city of heresy built by demons. Everyone living in this city, in this country, without exception, is an evildoer destined for hell. When the Lord of Armies' angelic armies arrive in Atlantis, do you think you can escape?" His words finally scared the Atlanteans. Thanks to the highly unstable and easily enraged Poseidon, the high god, who often vented his anger on the Atlanteans whenever he was provoked by Zeus or other main gods, these people were no strangers to divine punishment. Just recently, Poseidon attempted to seize Argos, a city that originally belonged to him, from Hera. However, with the covert assistance of Zeus, the king of gods, the filial Hephaestus, and a certain god of war who preferred to remain anonymous, Poseidon finally suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of heavenly Queen Hera, whom he had always looked down upon. Argos was taken by Hera, and his statue on the city wall was replaced by a woman. Upon returning to the sea, the furious sea god unleashed a flood, submerging a certain lower city district of Atlantis. To this day, that area remains a watery expanse, with countless commoners having perished. Therefore, regarding the gods destroying humanity, they understood it better and in more specific detail than Ares. Seeing that a mere mention from him had caused the Atlanteans to show expressions of fear, the bard from Sparta, while surprised, couldn't help but feel grateful to Poseidon, who constantly rained divine punishments down on the earth. After expressing his gratitude, he continued to stir up trouble for the god of war and humanity. "Then, what should we do?" The Atlanteans, completely terrified by the bard, immediately showed expressions of helpless fear. Perhaps only one person present could answer their doubts, so they all placed their last hope on the bard who had informed them of these matters. And this bard did not disappoint. Facing the gazes of the Atlanteans, he cleared his throat and then said, "As for a solution, of course there is." "What solution?" The Atlanteans quickly gathered around him, asking with a hint of pleading. "Good sir, if you tell us the solution, we will give you whatever you want. What do you desire? Gold and silver treasures? Fine wine and delicacies? Or women?" "I want none of these," the bard shook his head and said, "because I cannot save you. Only you can save yourselves." He pointed at the Atlanteans and said, "The Lord of Armies will only bring down punishment upon those evildoers who collude with demons. If, before the angels arrive, you offer your devout faith to him and his angels, then upon hearing your prayers, the Lord of Armies will naturally forgive you. Revere him, and you shall be spared death. Just praying is enough." The Atlanteans rejoiced at the news. They already offered daily sacrifices and prayers to the sea god Poseidon, so now it was just a change of target, a business they were very familiar with. Of course, just praying isn't enough. The bard shook his head and said, "You must truly believe in them." "This, we do believe, but will the gods truly feel it?" The Atlanteans were very hesitant. "Do you think gods are like a false god such as Poseidon, where it doesn't matter if you are humble to his face but curse and mock him behind his back?" The bard glanced at these people. "God is omniscient. He will naturally hear your devout prayers, and perhaps even bestow some benefits upon you, for example, like this." He stretched out a hand, and several red magic patterns suddenly appeared from the void for an instant. Then, in the bard's palm, flames formed out of thin air immediately condensed into a massive cleaver, falling into his hand. "This is the blessing of the angels, and the grace of God." Holding the cleaver, the bard said to the Atlanteans, "Once your faith reaches a certain threshold, you will also be granted this power by God. At that time, if you use this power to help God eliminate more evil, God will naturally forgive your sins." Chapter 111, Chapter 109 Can't even pull a 300-pound bow? In the underworld, inside Hecate's magic workshop, the moon goddess, wearing slippers, threw a stack of papyrus directly at Ares's face, who was sitting cross-legged on a soft bed. "Here, the Atlanteans have taken the bait. The experimental data and debugging measures for the mechanical god are all here. See for yourself." "Thank you, teacher." Thrown by Hecate, Ares, who had been daydreaming and simultaneously communicating with several small accounts in different places, came back to his senses. He thanked Hecate and then asked, "So, does the divine art magic foundation work?" "I can only say that idol worship might be surprisingly effective for mortals," Hecate smacked her lips. "But I still find it more convenient to directly manipulate fragments of the god's authority. This is inherently a low-end application of magic, reducing operational difficulty and magic power requirements, specifically prepared for mortals." Ares neatly stacked the papers but did not look at them. Instead, he said, "Then, teacher, you should go rest first. You've worked hard these past few days. I still have some things to deal with. I'll look at these once I'm done." "What are you busy with? Are you still creating that all-female warrior race, the Amazon, that you mentioned before?" Hecate asked, puzzled. "I remember helping you create the first generation of Amazons, didn't I?" "That's already done," Ares replied. "I'm currently busy confronting Athena." Just as his main body spoke with Hecate, in Athens, Ares's divine power clone stood beside a group of taciturn Spartans, confronting Athena, who stood beside the Athenians. Next to the Athenians were many wooden crates. 2 of them had been opened, revealing exquisite weaponry inside. However, looking at these fine weapons and equipment, Athena showed displeasure. "Ares, what is the meaning of this?" she questioned her brother. "The deal my people and your people agreed upon earlier regarding those Pelasgians. Your people must exchange the best weapons and equipment or manufacturing technology from Sparta. Are the Spartans trying to renege on the deal? How am I reneging? You need to show evidence when you speak, don't you dare slander me. Ares also responded angrily, hands on his hips. I've given you the goods, all the best weapons and equipment. How can you say my people are welshing? Athena glanced at the contents of the box, then fumed. You call this the best weapons and equipment? Are these things for humans? Ares also looked into the box upon hearing this. The box contained only bronze weapons. In terms of craftsmanship and materials, they were indeed the best in the Greek world at the time. However, these weapons were all made of bronze, with no other materials. The daggers were fine, although heavy, they could be used as slightly shorter two-handed greatswords. But even the spears and shields were made entirely of bronze, which was utterly absurd. Pure metal polearms could not possibly be used as weapons by ordinary people. If the Athenians were to use these weapons in battle, they might not even be able to lift them when the enemy approached. Ares clearly knew this, but he deliberately showed an innocent expression, looking at Athena, and retorted. These aren't for humans? Look at these weapons, how damn well made they are. I'm telling you, Sparta's craftsmen were personally trained by my elder brother Hephaestus. You indiscriminately beat my elder brother, the god of fire, back then, and now you dare to come out and slander his craftsmanship? Do you really think there's no one in this world who dares to stand up against you? Nonsense! You've been targeting me ever since I was born. Athena was furious inside. She gritted her teeth, enduring patiently, and said word by word. How many times do I have to tell you, you imbecile? No mortal in this world goes to battle with pure metal shields and spears. What do you mean, no? Ares pointed at Athena's nose and loudly exclaimed, you're talking nonsense. My Spartans, they all use these kinds of weapons on the battlefield. They just recently, right under your noses, slaughtered Poseidon's Atlanteans, making them abandon their armor and cry for their mothers. What now? The Atlanteans are gone, and you pull up your pants and want to go back on your word. Athena did not speak, but she cast a glance, and an Athenian warrior behind her immediately understood, stepping forward and shouting. Respected Ares, I do not believe there is any mortal in this world who can lift such heavy weapons to fight. What? You don't believe it? Good. You there! Ares casually pointed at a Spartan warrior to step forward, then commanded, come, you show him how a Spartan fights with such weapons. Understood. This Spartan warrior, like the others, was taciturn. Hearing his god's command, he stepped forward without a word, approached the box of weapons, reached out, and easily picked up one of the bronze spears. The Spartan warrior effortlessly twirled the heavy spear in front of the Athenians, leaving them dumbfounded. Just then, Ares reached out again and said to the questioning Athenian. Just looking at it, you probably won't believe it. Come, sir, you can come up and feel the power of these weapons directly. Of course, if anything happens, we Spartans bear no responsibility, since you were the one who asked for the inspection. The Athenian looked at the Spartan warrior whose biceps were larger than his head, then looked at the god of war opposite him, and sweat broke out on his forehead in fear. Great god of war, I think it's not necessary. I believe you. What nonsense are you talking about? I've told you to come up, and you're not coming up. Are you looking down on me, hey? Ares raised his voice, fuming. If you ignore me, I'll throw a tantrum. Then I'll have my Spartans flatten your Athens and capture your wives and daughters as slaves. Goddess, save me! Hearing Ares's threat, the Athenian immediately knelt down in fear, but he knelt before his own goddess. Tisk, weakling! Ares scornfully pursed his lips when he saw the Athenian's reaction, then turned to his followers and said, do you see? This is Athena's follower, can't even draw a mere 300-pound longbow. Everyone, don't be like such a weakling. All right, Ares, stop messing around with me here. Athena raised her delicate eyebrows, ignoring her follower. She pointed at a bronze pillar that wasn't in the box but was carried by the Spartans and leaned against a nearby stone, continuing to ask. I won't even mention what's in the box, but what's the meaning of this pillar? Is this a decoration you're giving me? Decoration your head? Can't you tell this is also a weapon? Ares said to the Spartan warrior who had stepped forward to perform, you tell her what kind of weapon this pillar is. Yes. This Spartan warrior was clearly not eloquent. After receiving Ares's command, he racked his brains for a long time before finally saying to Athena. This is a weapon that only our strongest Spartan warriors can use. To this day, only 2 kings, the high priest, and the grand commander among the magistrates can use it. I am still too weak to be worthy of such a first-rate weapon. I understand, you don't need to say any more. Athena pinched the bridge of her nose, then waved her hand. I don't want to argue with you. Consider this your win for now. Leave. I don't want to see you right now. Humph, what do you mean I won? It was your fault to begin with. Yes, 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 just get out, I beg you. After much persuasion, Athena finally got the triumphant Ares to leave Athens with a large group of Spartans. After the god of war departed, her expression slowly returned from anger to calm. Goddess, did we really just let them go? The Athenian leader asked with some displeasure. What else? If you want to go reason with these Spartans, go ahead, I won't stop you. Athena answered casually, not even wanting to look at her follower. The Athenian leader immediately swallowed all his reluctance. Are we just going to let Ares be so arrogant? At this moment, a priestess of Athena nearby also said with some dissatisfaction, you are clearly the strongest 4th-generation main god. Don't talk about this anymore. Take these weapons to be reforged, Athena said calmly, looking in the direction Ares had left. Just ignore him. He doesn't have many years left to live anyway. Chapter 112, Chapter 110 Guaranteed Profit. After triumphantly bringing both the Spartans and the Pelasgians back to Sparta, Ares's divine avatar returned to Olympus, and the matter concerning the Pelasgians was naturally taken over by his subordinate, the Sparta high priest. On the Atlanteans' battlefield, the Pelasgians fought bravely, and their tribe had already lost many members while resisting the Athenians, so their numbers were not large. The number of Atlanteans killed by the Pelasgians on the battlefield had long exceeded their entire tribe's population. For this, Ares even used the weapons that the Athenians would never be able to use in their lifetime to exchange for the Pelasgian women and children who were slaves in Athens, working in production and daily life. Upon arriving in Sparta, the high priest promoted them to Spartan citizens and assigned them to various industries within Sparta according to their respective skills. In this conflict between Athens and Atlantis, Sparta was undoubtedly the biggest winner. They dumped a large amount of equipment and armor in Atlantis, exchanging it for entire ships full of gold and silver. Then, under the employment of the Athenians, they went to Athens to help them beat the Atlanteans. Although the Spartan mercenaries, in order to retrieve this group of Pelasgians, didn't even demand the Athenians' commission when they deployed, and even lost a batch of weapons, the Spartans suffered no loss at all. In this era of scarce human resources, talent is the most valuable resource. With manpower, a city-state's prosperity is a foregone conclusion. Moreover, the commission given by the Athenians was originally small, far less generous than what the Atlanteans offered. The Spartans and Pelasgians, disguised as wooden barrels, risked their lives to infiltrate the Atlanteans' main camp, slaughtering many. The Atlantean captives and various spoils of war obtained from this war naturally also belonged to the Spartans. It can be said that most of the weapons and equipment the Spartans had previously sold to Atlantis were seized back by the Spartans after this battle. Furthermore, while Athena and Poseidon's energies were tied up in the conflict between their respective city-states, Ares was far from idle. He fanned the flames in Poseidon's Atlantis, and testing the operation mechanism of the mechanical god was just one part of it. During this time, Ares visited every place he could remember where famous Greek demigod Argo heroes were born, and he even created a subordinate account to infiltrate as an informant. At the same time, he also found Chiron, the centaur who lived in seclusion in the Pelion cave and would later become the mentor of many Argo heroes, and established a good relationship with him, as a fallback. Moreover, while Athena and Poseidon were fully focused on preparing for war, Ares and Hecate created a group of female warriors, named them Amazon, bestowed a special belt upon one of their leaders, and placed them in Thermodon, Pontus, in Asia Minor. Ares did not pay too much attention to this tribe. After giving them the power to be self-sufficient, Ares allowed them to develop freely. Both the tribal customs and systems were formulated by these humans themselves. However, he allocated part of this tribe's faith to Artemis. Thus, the hunting goddess would naturally help him protect and bless this tribe of women. However, despite this, the Amazons' primary object of worship remained Ares. If Ares were to rally them in the future, these Amazon female warriors would surely follow Ares's banner. In addition to these matters, bards from Sparta also spread throughout the world, using the conflicts between various city-states or main gods to create many localized wars on the land. The Spartans, just like they did between Atlantis and Athens, sold weapons in these wars or directly sent warriors for training, earning a great deal of wealth. Upon returning to the city-state, they kept the wealth needed for the city-state's production and development, and according to divine oracle, converted the remaining wealth into precious ores, which were then thrown into a deep well built in the very center of Sparta. This deep well was personally designed by Hecate for Sparta. It directly connected to the underworld. Below it was Hecate's netherworld magic workshop, and this deep well led directly to an area for ore smelting. After the Spartans threw these ores in, Hecate would use magic to smelt them into molten metal slurry, which would be used for the manufacturing of mechanical gods. Ares's four subordinate gods terror, tremor, panic, and dread, which in Atlantis are called conquest, war, famine, and death. These four mechanical god prototypes have been successfully tested in Atlantis. It has been proven that Hecate and Ares's ideas were indeed correct. Therefore, the goddess of magic and the god of war have also put the manufacturing of second-generation mechanical gods on the agenda. Among this batch of mechanical gods, there are not only several mechanical gods of the same specifications as the current four mechanical angels, but also a main god-level mechanical deity intended to replace the Olympian main gods in the future, which has been added to the manufacturing plan. The normal height of this mechanical main god is about 7 meters, and when fully unfolded, its entire volume can even rival that of the ancient Titan giants. To draw the design blueprint for this thing, the moon goddess and the god of war spent countless sleepless nights, working tirelessly on the design until they finally completed it just before Atlantis surrendered. For this, Hecate specifically opened up an imaginary space within the netherworld magic workshop to accommodate the massive body of this mechanical main god. A new generation of demigod Argo heroes is about to be born, and Greece's heroic age is about to enter its most brilliant period. Before this period, Ares's plan, Athena's plan, and the plans of various gods were all secretly progressing simultaneously. A new day began, and the Olympian main gods' morning meeting started as usual. Ares, who had been busy all night with Hecate researching various component specifications and capabilities of the subsequent mechanical gods, yawned as he entered the God King's Hall of Olympus. He hadn't slept a wink last night, so he just came directly when he saw the time was right. Thus, he was one of the earliest main gods to arrive there today. As soon as he entered the God King's Hall, Ares saw Zeus and Poseidon squatting to the side, discussing something. The two old men, who caused the greatest damage to the image of the Olympian male gods, were now gathered together, finally behaving like a pair of drinking buddies. Zeus had a somewhat lewd smile on his face, whispering something into Poseidon's ear, and Poseidon, who had been in a bad mood these past few days, finally showed a faint smile. Curious, Ares walked over and asked, "Zeus, Poseidon, what happy things are you two chatting about?" Chapter 113, Chapter 111 Give him a beautiful wife. Oh, Ares, you've come at just the right time. As soon as Zeus saw Ares approaching, he raised his head and waved to him. Come, 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 I remember you recently started another tribe, something called the Amazon. I heard from others that the women there are all beautiful and well-built, and each one is more uninhibited than the last. Is this true? Ares wasn't surprised by this. Indeed, when he and Hecate created the Amazons, they also considered aesthetics, so these first-generation Amazons were all incredibly well-built, beautiful, and athletic women. Furthermore, Ares did not interfere with the Amazonian system but found them a patron in Artemis. Artemis was a virgin goddess who genuinely enjoyed single life, so when the Amazons formulated their rules based on their own beliefs, they also considered this aspect. Normally, the Amazons strictly forbade men from approaching their borders, but without any intercourse with men, the Amazons could not continue to exist. Therefore, the Amazons would visit the Gargarians in the Caucasus every year to hold a marriage ritual. They would engage in a contest there, and if there were strong men who could defeat the Amazonian warriors, these men would be temporarily accepted by the Amazonian women as intimate guests, where they would have a brief, dreamlike encounter with these beautiful female warriors. After the marriage ritual ended, the Amazonian warriors who participated in the ceremony would return to their capital, Themyscira, located on the Euxine coast, and give birth to the children they carried. If the child was a girl, the female warriors would keep her in the country, allowing her to become an Amazon. If it was a boy, these boys would be sent back to their fathers to be raised by their single fathers. Those qualified to participate in such marriage rituals were basically powerful warriors with names and reputations in the Greek world. Many of them were also followers of Zeus, and Zeus most likely learned about this rather enchanting marriage ritual from them. Ah, Ares, is there any way you could introduce us? Zeus then put his arm around his usually disagreeable elder brother, Poseidon, and urged Ares. Look at you, a while ago you and your sister bullied your second uncle, making him furious. Now is a good opportunity for you to apologize. Introduce your second uncle and me to a chance to go to the marriage ritual, and your second uncle will calm down. Poseidon, don't you agree? Yes, yes, Poseidon also nodded with a straight face. Ares, it's up to you to show us. All right, Ares sneered inwardly, but laughed heartily on his face. I didn't expect you, Zeus, and Poseidon to be so courageous. I underestimated you before, Poseidon. I can introduce you to participate in the Amazonian marriage ritual, but I must warn you beforehand, my people, Artemis's followers, they believe in the rule of women are superior to men, and in bed, these women are very proactive. Proactive is good. The God King and the Sea King, those two old scoundrels, showed lewd smiles. We like those who take the initiative. The proactive I'm talking about is not as simple as just taking the initiative. Ares pondered for a moment and said. How to describe it? It's probably that when they are in bed, they like to break men's hands and feet, and they also use some particularly terrifying tools, from small knives to spears, everything imaginable. So, the men qualified to participate in the marriage ritual must be the strongest warriors. If they are not the strongest warriors, they might die. Zeus and Poseidon exchanged glances and asked hesitantly. So, is such a marriage ritual enjoyable? It depends on you. If you find it enjoyable to have a woman straddling you and punching your face, wanting to beat you to death, then I don't care. Ares shrugged and spread his hands. Anyway, the Amazon queen seems to want a demigod offspring too. Then forget it, forget it. Zeus and Poseidon waved their hands repeatedly, saying, we still prefer normal women. Although these two old scoundrels had strong tastes, they were ultimately gods with extremely strong desires for control. They certainly wouldn't want a woman to completely take the initiative in an intimate encounter, especially such a violent woman. Is that so? What a pity, Ares sighed faintly. After scaring away the two old perverts, the other main gods also arrived one after another. Then, the Olympus gods began their discussion. Zeus first judged Athena's victory in the previous war between Atlantis and Athens, distributed the treasures the gods had wagered in the bet, and then began to discuss another somewhat serious issue. Because of the destruction of the humans of the Silver Age, a large number of souls have been accumulating in the underworld. Ares stepped forward and spoke for Hecate. Not long ago, I learned from my teacher Hecate that due to the war between Atlantis and Athens, and simultaneously, the conflicts between other city-states and countries in the world, another batch of souls has accumulated in the underworld. After crossing the river, all these souls are piled up in the underworld garden, awaiting judgment from the underworld gods. Although my teacher's pet, Cerberus, guards them, the number of these souls is simply too vast. Even though Hades has summoned all the underworld gods he still cannot fully judge these souls. He fears that some dead might escape from the underworld and cause chaos on earth. As you know, current humans have no means to deal with souls and undead, so Hades asked my teacher to convey a message to Zeus through me. He needs some help. This is indeed a problem, Zeus nodded. Then, let Aeacus, Minos, and Rhadamanthus be the judges of the underworld. I know these three children, they have always been selfless, noble in character, and their lifespans have also come to an end. The three individuals Zeus mentioned were naturally gods and demigods born to Zeus and other goddesses or women. Because their maternal lines were relatively weaker deities or mortals, these three did not possess immense power and thus had limited lifespans. No one among the Olympus gods stood up to object to this, not even Ares. Don't ask, it's all about self-interest. And after Zeus arranged for the three underworld judges, Hades also heard the oracle and proactively connected to the Olympus holy fire enshrined in the center of the god king's hall. Seeing his taciturn elder brother appear, Zeus asked, "Hades, how do you feel about this arrangement?" "It's good, but not enough," Hades frowned. "Three judges, if they follow the judgment process, the souls currently accumulated in the underworld are enough for them to judge for 200 years without rest. Are there so many souls in the underworld?" Zeus also frowned upon hearing this, asking. He began to be suspicious again, thinking his elder brother was asking him for more people to strengthen the underworld's power, intending to usurp his position in the future. "It used to be fine, but ever since humans were born, it gradually became insufficient," Hades slowly said. "Humans multiply on Earth, and many die from disease, famine, war, and beasts. Moreover, the underworld not only accepts the souls of humans and gods, but the souls of other animals that die because of humans must also come to the underworld to be judged." Well, if three aren't enough. Zeus pondered, not wanting to add more people to Hades. But just then, Athena suddenly spoke up, "Zeus, since Hades is short on people, why don't we give him a beautiful wife?" Chapter 114, Chapter 112 Nephew, Uncle actually has a girlfriend. A beautiful lady. Zeus's eyes lit up at the words. Athena's suggestion gave him an idea. Indeed, he could send a beautiful goddess to be Hades's wife, to become the queen of the underworld, sharing his power, just like Hera and him. However, this goddess's heart must definitely be aligned with him. This was not easy, as 99% of the goddesses on Olympus were not very willing to marry Hades. It wasn't that Hades was bad, it was just that goddesses generally coveted the prosperity of Olympus and had a fear of the sunless underworld. If Zeus were to truly force them to marry Hades, then these goddesses would likely immediately side with the gods of the underworld the moment they married. There was some subtlety here. He really needed to think carefully about how to proceed. However, the main task now was to first appease his seemingly desireless elder brother. "A beautiful lady, let's not bother." The king of the underworld in the holy fire shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "I know how unpopular I am among the gods, Zeus. If they're unwilling, don't force them." "Exactly, why do you have to force Hades to do such a thing?" Ares also shouted. Isn't it good to live a single life like me, free and unrestrained? When you want to do something, no one can control you. Ares, shut up. Zeus glared at his foolish son and said. I'm talking about something good for your uncle. What are you meddling in here? Go on, go play with your Spartans. Ares, don't say that. After hearing Ares's words, Hades's old face also showed some embarrassment. Unlike you, your uncle actually has a girlfriend. What? Traitor! Ares cried out to Hades in heartbroken indignation. I always thought you couldn't find a woman. Hades, how could you betray me? Damn it, Mother Rhea above, this kid's words are truly asking for a beating. Hades in the torch clicked his tongue and said to Zeus. Just like you and Poseidon back in the day. All right, let's not bring up those things again. Hearing Hades bring up old matters again, Zeus was somewhat displeased. He felt that Hades was trying to assert his authority as an elder brother, so he interrupted the conversation between the king of the underworld and the god of war and continued to press. Hades, if you wish, you can choose any goddess on Olympus. As long as you fancy her, I, Zeus, will use my power as the king of gods to make her descend to the underworld to serve you. How does that sound? Let's not bother, let's not bother. Hades shook his head and said. I already have a candidate for the queen of the underworld. You should leave those beautiful goddesses for others. After speaking, he seemed afraid that Zeus would ask further, so he added, have the 3 judges report to the underworld early, and then hung up the communication with Zeus. Seeing his elder brother leave, a trace of unwillingness flashed across Zeus's face. Then, he looked around and asked. I think that since the heavens and the sea have their queens, the underworld should also have its mistress. What do you all think? Demeter, Poseidon, Hera, and other elder generation main gods present all expressed their agreement, while Ares and the younger generation main gods told Zeus, whatever makes you happy. So it's settled then. What methods do you have to make my stubborn elder brother fall in love? Zeus inquired. That's easy, Zeus. You go to the underworld, put a divine lightning bolt to Hades's neck, and directly threaten him. Ares cleared his throat, imitating Zeus's tone, and said fiercely, Hades, are you going to marry this woman or not? Are you trying to make Hades directly use his authority as the king of the underworld to trap me in the underworld? Practice makes perfect. Zeus had now become immune to Ares's behavior. Therefore, this time he simply smiled and ignored his son's disruptive suggestion. He looked at Aphrodite, who was in charge of matters of love between men and women, and asked. Aphrodite, do you have any good ideas? This. Aphrodite hesitated and said. Perhaps we can enlist the power of Eros. Eros is the god of love and desire, but he is not, as later legends claim, the child born from an affair between Ares and Aphrodite. Instead, he is one of the primordial gods who participated in the creation of the world at the very beginning of the planet's birth, and also the primordial god who endowed all things with desire and love. His divine status is higher than all the gods of Olympus combined, and naturally much higher than Aphrodite, who is a superficial main god. Moreover, it was inherently absurd that the son of Ares and Aphrodite could control the desires of great gods like Hades, the king of the underworld, and Apollo, the god of light. To control main god-level deities, only great gods of the primordial god tier of Earth could do so. However, when the Euxine vanguard attacked, Eros had already been torn apart by that monster along with the first generation of great gods, and he had long since died, becoming a mere record in Earth's history. However, after thinking for a moment, Zeus understood Aphrodite's meaning. Aphrodite, you mean you can use your divine office to obtain a portion of Eros's power? Yes. Aphrodite bit her red lips cautiously and whispered, however, Eros's power is too immense. Even if I exhaust all my divine power, I can only obtain one bow and arrow from him, which serves as his divine tool, and there will only be one chance. If this attempt fails, I will have no way to deal with Hades. Then, I'll leave this matter to you. Zeus instructed Aphrodite. Yes. Aphrodite quickly smiled and bowed her head, accepting the task. Ever since she became a main god, she had basically been treated as a public lover by powerful male gods on Olympus. The minor gods were fine, but among the 12 main gods of equal rank, no one respected her. This time was her chance to prove herself. She wanted to show her colleagues that she, Aphrodite, was not just a pretty face, but also capable of getting things done. After explaining some specific details to Aphrodite, Zeus then asked the other main gods. I want this goddess who marries into the underworld to still have her heart set on Olympus even after she arrives there. Do you have any ideas? Didn't you just provide the solution, Zeus? Athena said softly with confidence. Since Aphrodite can incite Hades's desires, let his desires be incited even more intensely. If he were to seize a goddess as his wife by force, just as Poseidon forcibly seized the queen of the sea, and then you mediate, allowing this goddess to return to the mortal world every so often to enjoy the prosperity of the surface, then I think the one this goddess would resent would definitely not be you, but Hades, who forcibly took her. Chapter 115, Chapter 113. Find someone to take the blame first. After hearing Athena's plan, Zeus clapped his hands and laughed heartily, exclaiming, Good, good, Athena, you truly are a clever daughter, you have perfectly inherited your mother's wisdom. Poseidon, however, was somewhat displeased. What do you mean by forcibly snatched? Amphitrite and I have true love, all right? She's living very happily now. Ares looked at Athena and saw that the goddess was smiling silently, like a military advisor strategizing on Olympus. However, Ares remembered the heartfelt words of Athena he had overheard from Prometheus, and he knew that the goddess's heart was certainly not as calm as she appeared. He estimated that at this moment, the goddess was probably furiously cursing Zeus's 18 generations of ancestors, as the unfaithful man dared to mention her poor mother in front of her. Afterward, Athena smiled and added some specific details, and then Zeus finalized the plan. However, he did not reveal who the lucky one to be married to Hades would be, only telling the gods that he already had a candidate in mind. At the end of the meeting, Zeus also threatened the main gods. Remember, before this matter is settled, everyone must keep it a secret. No one is allowed to spread it to outsiders, and especially, Hades must absolutely not know about this plan. If anyone dares to leak it to Hades, then let them taste the flavor of my divine lightning. The gods naturally assented verbally, but what they truly thought in their hearts was something no one else could know. No one knew what the others were thinking, but the moment Ares walked out of the God King's hall, he had already decided to tip off Hades. What a joke! It was precisely because Hades, this lenient leader, was in charge of the underworld that he and Hecate were able to, make a mess, work together as teacher and student, pushing forward so many major plans in the underworld. If Zeus were to insert an informant into the underworld, especially in such an important position as Queen of the Underworld, then he and Hecate wouldn't even be able to secretly cause trouble in the underworld, let alone live peacefully there. Zeus, what you're doing is wrong. A forced melon isn't sweet. Hades clearly already has a lover, and you still want to mess with him. Even I, Ares, who values righteousness, can't stand it. Ares thought to himself. Moreover, Ares was very clear about who Queen of the Underworld Persephone was, a notorious promiscuous figure in myths, whose wantonness could even rival Aphrodite. Not only did she have an affair and bear children with her birth father Zeus by the river Styx, but she also openly competed with Aphrodite for a beautiful mortal youth while already having a husband. In all the myths Ares had read, there was never a single myth that spoke well of the Queen of the Underworld. In myths, the forgiving actions were basically all done by the King of the Underworld, while the Queen of the Underworld's actions were either greedy demands or harsh restraints. Even Orpheus, son of Apollo, when he descended into the underworld, dared not call the queen of the underworld by her name, because he felt that the queen of the underworld was truly too terrifying. Such a queen of the underworld, sitting in that position, would be bad for everyone except Zeus. Ares's intervention to help Hades this time was also helping himself and Hecate. However, although he intended to tip off Hades, Ares was not so foolish as to actually run up to Hades and ask him, "Uncle, uncle, how many girlfriends do you have? Zeus says he wants to add one for you, do you think that's okay?" That would simply be ridiculous. Although he had already decided that his goal was to destroy the corrupt divine system led by Zeus and ultimately achieve the goal of confronting Gaia, the planetary inhibitory force, his strategy against the Olympus gods so far was still to stir up conflicts and make them attack each other, in order to divide them. A united Olympus was indeed a tough nut to crack, but thanks to Zeus, his existence made the division of Olympus no longer an impossible task. So now, after returning to the god of war's divine throne, Ares began to carefully ponder which lucky friend he should find this time to take the fall. He instinctively first thought of Athena, but if Athena were to do such a thing, it would be too out of character for the goddess of wisdom, no one would believe it if word got out. So Ares turned to consider other main gods. Hera and Hephaestus, mother and son, as well as Apollo and Artemis, these main gods with whom he had good relations, were excluded first. Next, Hestia, a respectable goddess, he also did not intend to consider, and the goddess of the hearth had long since descended to the mortal realm years ago, not on Olympus, and was unaware of the god's secret plotting. Thus, the remaining candidates were Hermes, Aphrodite, Demeter, and Poseidon, these four main gods. After careful consideration, Ares then removed Aphrodite and Hermes. The former two were now completely loyal to Zeus and unlikely to dare to do such a audacious thing. The latter was busy with tasks assigned by Zeus, and should not appear before the gods for a short time, having neither reason nor opportunity. Between Demeter and Poseidon, Ares began to hesitate. Both of these main gods had motives to oppose Zeus. The latter had always regarded Zeus as an imaginary enemy, which was a semi-open secret among the gods. It would not be surprising for him to try to tell his elder brother this secret and then win over Hades to oppose Zeus. As for Demeter, it was because the queen of the underworld chosen by Zeus this time was her most beloved daughter, Persephone, who was currently the goddess of seeds. The goddess of agriculture would certainly not agree to this plan after knowing about it, sending her lovely daughter to the cold underworld. However, after thinking for a long time, Ares still chose Poseidon, his old friend. After all, Demeter and Zeus were husband and wife. Given her temperament, she would likely directly confront Zeus about such a matter, rather than resorting to such behind-the-scenes scheming. Moreover, many of Poseidon's Atlanteans had recently died. First, they were attacked by the Spartans and Pelasgians when they went to war, and after returning, they were punished by an enraged Poseidon with divine retribution for their incompetence. The specters of these Atlanteans should have also arrived in the underworld, queuing in the barren garden in front of the underworld king's palace, awaiting judgment from the gods of the underworld to see if they would go to Elysium or Tartarus. Many of these Atlanteans harbored resentment towards the Sea King, especially the Atlantean commander who was speared to death by the Spartans. If Poseidon hadn't insisted on interfering and ordered them to attack quickly, they wouldn't have been cornered into such a predicament by the Spartans and Athenians. But after his death, Poseidon still wanted to blame him and his compatriots, which would certainly infuriate anyone. So, after some thought, Ares settled on a plan in his mind. Chapter 116, Chapter 114. Here it comes. A cold wind howled, and ghostly wails echoed. The vast wilderness before the Acheron River in the underworld, known as the Fields of Truth, was overgrown with black poplars and barren coconut trees. A ferocious beast, Cerberus, guarded the hell gate leading to this place. Originally, the souls would not linger here for long. They would soon arrive at the river Styx, and with the help of Charon, the ferryman of the underworld, cross the river to the fields of truth to face judgment. However, due to the overwhelming number of deceased on earth, Charon, being the only ferryman, could not quickly transport all the souls across the river Styx. Consequently, a large number of souls were congested in this fields of truth. Some patiently waited in line, hoping for an early judgment and their final destination, while others, based on their relationships in life, gathered in small groups, chatting and bragging. Cerberus, who was dozing beside the Hell Gate, paid them no mind. As long as they did not escape through the Hell Gate, Cerberus's master, Hecate, would not punish him. Among these lingering souls were, naturally, the Atlanteans who had recently died in the war and divine punishment. The Atlantean commander who led 2,500 Atlanteans to fight against the Athenians was also here. They had been stranded here for many days. Initially, he made a profound self-critique to his subordinates, admitting his failure in command. However, the Atlanteans, who knew the inside story, did not blame him much. They all knew that the Atlantean commander's hasty deployment of troops was actually due to an oracle from Poseidon, which involved an unauthorized mobilization of the army. He had no way to stop it. Afterward, the heroes reconciled and naturally elected him as the commander of this group of Atlanteans. However, not long after them, another group of souls from Atlantis arrived in this garden. Most of these souls were commoners, and upon inquiry, it was learned that they had all died due to Poseidon's divine punishment. This was not surprising. It would be strange if Poseidon did not blame the Atlanteans for the failed operation. So, this former king of Atlantis, one of the 10 kings, again apologized to these Atlanteans in a gentle tone and explained in detail how Poseidon had urged them to hurry up, seeking the commoners' forgiveness. After all, everyone was already dead, and before Hades, there was no distinction of noble or ignoble status, all beings were equal. This Atlantean king simply set aside his royal pretense. After some explanation, everyone tacitly blamed Poseidon for everything. The commoners and the Atlantean warriors also reconciled, gathering together in a huddle, quietly waiting for Charon to ferry them across the river, lest they be bullied by people from other countries in this garden. However, as the Atlanteans quietly huddled together, they were unaware that 2 gods had been observing them from above for a long time. Are those the Atlanteans? Through the magic circle she had opened, Hecate gazed at the thousands of people gathered in the garden below and quietly asked. They seem quite normal, not at all like their chief god, who suffers from intermittent manic episodes. Why would they believe in Poseidon of all people? There's no choice, they need to make a living, Ares replied. Teacher, do you think everyone in this world is like you, able to ignore others if they wish? They are mortals, and they live in the sea, so naturally, they have to make a living from Poseidon. Hecate turned her head to look at Ares. At this moment, Ares was performing the final debugging. Beside him, a low-level spiritual familiar summoned by Hecate had transformed into the appearance of an Atlantean soul. It was now making corresponding movements along with Ares's actions. When Ares smiled, it would also smile. When Ares pretended to be angry, it would also show an angry expression on its face. Are you ready? Hecate urged. Time waits for no one. I still have to wait for Hades to hear the news and actively ask me about it. What if he falls for it before then? After the Olympus gods concluded their meeting, Ares immediately broadcasted the matter to the moon goddess. Like Ares, Hecate also disliked having Zeus's spy as a leader above her. Therefore, she and her disciple once again hit it off and began to plan this scheme. Coming. Ares said, stepping forward and manipulating the low-level familiar, which had transformed into an Atlantean commoner's soul, into this fields of truth. The moment the familiar landed, Cerberus perked up his ears, his fierce gaze fixed on it. However, he then saw his master Hecate and Ares standing behind the familiar, separated by a teleportation gate, smiling kindly at him. So, he quickly curled back up, pretending not to have seen anything. The soul, controlled by Ares, pretended to be a newcomer, appearing dazed and bewildered. It looked around at the other souls in confusion as it moved towards the Atlanteans' location. When it was halfway there, some of the Atlanteans noticed it. Then, a noble soul shouted, "King, look over there, aren't those our people coming again?" The Atlantean commander looked over upon hearing this and also noticed the dazed soul. He looked for a few moments, then confirmed. "Indeed, they are our Atlantean people. No other city-state wears such attire. Perfect, let's go ask him about the current situation in Atlantis." So, this group of Atlanteans walked up and stopped the bewildered Atlantean commoner's soul. "Hey, you over there!" Hearing their voices, the aimlessly wandering soul stopped and turned its head somewhat confusedly, looking at them. When he saw that this group of souls in front of him also wore Atlantean attire, some of whom appeared to be nobles and royalty, he quickly exclaimed with surprise, I never expected to meet my compatriots even after death. You are indeed an Atlantean." Hearing the Atlantean soul's words, the Atlanteans present were also delighted. They asked one after another, "You died after us. What happened to Atlantis after our death? Has Poseidon's divine punishment ended? Is Atlantis still safe and sound?" "Ah, that!" Hearing the questions from his compatriots, the Atlantean soul sighed deeply, a bitter expression on his face. "When I died, Atlantis was not doing well." Chapter 117, Chapter 115 Use gods to fight gods. Upon hearing the words "not exactly good," the Atlanteans around them grew anxious. Although they themselves were dead, their wives, children, families, and friends were still living in Atlantis, so they quickly pressed for more information. "What do you mean? After Poseidon's divine punishment arrived, many people died. Although the remaining 9 kings of Atlantis gathered in the sea god temple to pray overnight, it had little effect. Poseidon firmly believed it was all our fault, and his wrath did not diminish in the slightest." The Atlantean ghost, controlled by Ares, spread his hands and said, "Later, I heard that the 9 kings, having no other choice, sacrificed the 3rd princess and the widows from several noble families in that area to appease the sea god's anger." "What did you say?" The commander of the Atlanteans here widened his eyes upon hearing this and asked, "The 3rd princess?" As mentioned before, this commander was one of the 10 kings of Atlantis before becoming the commander of the Atlantean expeditionary force, and he ranked 3rd among all the kings. Naturally, the 3rd princess who was offered as a sacrifice was actually his daughter. Afterward, the commander further inquired about the specific noble widows, and upon asking, he discovered that these noble widows were almost all the wives and daughters of the Atlanteans who had died in battle there. This fact enraged the Atlanteans present. "Damn it!" An Atlantean warrior shouted, "It was his own blind command that caused us to lose." Another Atlantean yelled, "If those Spartans weren't there, what would a mere Athenian amount to?" The Atlanteans were in an uproar for a long time, and soon reached a consensus. "Find a way to sneak out of the underworld and demand an explanation from that bastard god Poseidon. But the monster guarding the Hell Gate is incredibly fierce. Since arriving here, I have witnessed many unruly ghosts being swallowed alive by that demon." When this issue was brought up, the Atlantean commander looked gravely at his compatriots. "Don't let our current numbers deceive you. If we truly try to force our way through, even 10 times this many people would end up as prey for that beast. Even if we break through the Hell Gate and return to the living world, how will we fight Poseidon? We don't even know where he lives. That's secondary. It's hard to say whether Poseidon even fears little ghosts like us." As soon as these practical problems were mentioned, the Atlanteans' grand ambitions were immediately doused with a bucket of cold water. They looked at each other, somewhat disheartened, and said, "After all, he is a god. What do we mortals have to fight them with? Alas, if my wife and daughter follow Poseidon in the future, perhaps their lives will be better than with me. My daughter." Seeing the Atlanteans' distressed expressions, Ares knew it was his time to appear. So he manipulated the familiar, which had transformed into an Atlantean commoner ghost, to step forward and address the Atlanteans. Don't despair. In fact, there might be a way for us to deal with Poseidon. What way? The unwilling Atlanteans, upon hearing Ares's words, instantly perked up. They first cautiously glanced at the surrounding ghosts, then formed a circle with Ares at the center, and quietly asked. We mortals currently have no way to deal with gods, so. Ares raised an index finger. We must use a god to deal with a god. Use a god to deal with a god. The Atlantean commander heard this, a look of hesitation on his face. Do you mean we should try to incite other gods to deal with Poseidon? But which gods can we incite? Now that we are all dead, the only god we might be able to contact is Hades. Are we supposed to try to make Hades fight Poseidon? Poseidon is his own brother. Between us mortal ghosts and Poseidon, isn't it obvious who Hades would help? That's not necessarily true, and I never said we should use Hades to fight Poseidon. Ares pretended to look around, then lowered his voice and whispered to the Atlantean leaders, actually, before I died, I once heard a bard singing in a tavern that Zeus, king of the gods, was wary of his elder brother Hades, and therefore wanted to find a way for the gods to set a trap for him, to make him seize a queen of the underworld for himself, in order to curb his authority as king of the underworld. What? Is that true? Perhaps the gene for gossip runs in human blood. Upon hearing this news, all the Atlanteans present showed curious expressions. The Atlantean commander also lowered his voice and quietly asked. So, Zeus and Poseidon have such a bad relationship with Hades. Brothers turning against each other is a common occurrence. It's not as if it hasn't happened among us mortals, Ares replied. So you mean? The Atlantean commander pondered for a moment, then asked, we should go tell the king of the underworld this news, and then incite him to teach his brother Poseidon a lesson. No, that would be redundant. Ares shook his head. According to the news I heard from those Atlantean bards, we Atlanteans are highly likely to be judged and sent to Tartarus to suffer before the fields of truth. At that time, you can ask the king of the underworld for mercy, and then naturally sell this news to him. After that, you don't need to say anything or ask anything. If the king of the underworld asks where you heard this news, you just say that Poseidon, the sea god, drunkenly blurted it out. Oh. The Atlantean commander listened, gradually understanding the cleverness of the plan. He continued to ask, so, Hades will hate Poseidon? No, the bards all say that Hades, king of the underworld, is magnanimous. Facing his two younger brothers, he would most likely yield proactively and not quibble with Poseidon like this. Ares continued, the god we need to use against Poseidon is Zeus, king of the gods. Think about it, for such a big matter concerning Hades, Zeus would certainly demand Poseidon to keep it a secret beforehand. If Hades escapes Zeus's scheme because Poseidon leaked the news, will Zeus hate Hades, or will he hate the leaker, Poseidon? Wow, brilliant! After hearing Ares's plan, the Atlanteans all expressed their admiration. The Atlantean commander exclaimed, alas, it's a pity you are a commoner. If only you had been my strategist when we fought Athens. Chapter 118, Chapter 116 Lord Hades, listen to me. After Ares successfully misled a group of Atlanteans, Hecate quickly used her authority as the great moon goddess of the underworld to smooth things over. Charon, the ferryman, immediately let the Atlanteans cut the line, carrying them across the river Acheron of Woe to the fields of truth on the other side. However, during this process, the Atlantean civilian controlled by Ares accidentally fell off the boat due to the waves on the river Styx, screaming as he plunged into the river and was devoured by the numerous water ghosts within. Although the Atlanteans wanted to save this clever and interesting civilian, they abandoned their plan after Charon, the ferryman of the river Styx, warned them. Charon quickly ferried them across the river Styx, and upon disembarking, this group of Atlanteans arrived at a vast, boundless grey plain. This was the Fields of Truth, located within the underworld, used for judging departed souls. Upon the Atlanteans' arrival, divine messengers from the underworld quickly came to lead them. Several NYMPHSS of the underworld, theoretically Lamp Hades under Hecate's supervision, guided this group of Atlanteans along a path. At the end of the path, they saw one of the twin gods of the underworld, Hypnos, the god of sleep, as well as the ruler of the underworld, Hades, a taciturn old man holding a bident and dressed in black robes. Upon seeing the true forms of the heavenly gods, the Atlanteans were so intimidated by their divine might that they dared not move, standing silently in place, awaiting the king of the underworld's judgment. As expected, after the king of the underworld used his divine power to review the Atlanteans' entire lives, he quickly rendered a verdict. Many of the royal family and nobles among the Atlanteans were sentenced by the king of the underworld to suffer punishment in Tartarus, including the third king of Atlantis who commanded the Atlantean expeditionary force. Just as Hypnos, the god of sleep and the king of the underworld's right-hand man, calmly announced the king of the underworld's judgment to them, the face of his beloved princess appeared in the mind of this Atlantean king and commander. At this moment, he finally broke free from Hades's divine suppression, then immediately rushed to the king of the underworld, knelt before him, and pleaded, "Great Hades, please give me a chance to reform. I am willing to exchange a piece of information that is very valuable to you for the right to go to Elysium." "How dare you?" Hypnos stepped forward, his aura pressing down on the mortal ghost. "How dare you make demands of the king of the underworld?" "Hypnos." Hades stopped the god of sleep, who was about to punish this mortal, and then spoke to the Atlantean ghost in a gentle voice. "Atlantean, once my judgment is made, it cannot be changed. Therefore, I am sorry, whether or not you tell me this information, I cannot allow you to go from Tartarus to Elysium. Your lifetime of atrocities is too numerous, you must go to Tartarus to receive punishment. However, if you are willing to tell me this information, then when your relatives and friends die, I can have Karen bring them to me in advance to receive my judgment, so they do not have to linger in the underworld garden. How does that condition sound to you?" "Thank you, great Hades. I have a daughter. Although she may not have passed away yet, she is a gentle, kind, and lovely beautiful girl. I believe she will certainly be eligible to go to Elysium. At that time, please take good care of her." The Atlantean commander pleaded as he spoke. "Very well." Hades nodded and then said, "Tell me the information you spoke of." "Yes." The Atlantean commander lowered his head and said, "Actually, we heard that your two brothers, Zeus and Poseidon, along with the gods on Olympus, want to plot against you. They fear your power and authority, so they want to find a mistress for the underworld to restrain you. They want to force you to go out and forcibly take a goddess to be your wife, and this goddess will become the queen of the underworld." "What?" Hypnos exclaimed in surprise. "A free wife? Isn't that a good thing?" "All right, shut up." Hades glared at his subordinate. Although the brothers Hypnos and Thanatos were second-generation gods born from the primordial gods Nyx and Erebus, and theoretically should be considered nature deities born from the mist and night of the underworld, on par with titans like Kratos, these two brothers were thousands upon thousands of years old virgins, old Ares. The brothers had no experience in love, and Thanatos, the god of death, had no interest in love either. The brothers' knowledge and theories on matters of emotion were roughly equivalent to idiocy. However, although Hypnos had never been in love, he recently seemed to have developed a great interest in getting a wife for some inexplicable reason, and firmly believed that having a wife was a good thing, completely failing to understand the intricacies involved. As a third-generation god, Hades really did not want to patiently explain to Hypnos, who was theoretically his uncle, why marrying a wife was not necessarily a good thing. So, after reprimanding Hypnos, he ignored the god of sleep and instead asked the Atlantean commander, Where exactly did you hear this information? The Atlantean tavern, of course. The Atlantean commander said without hesitation. Going there feels just like coming home. Sleeping in the tavern feels much better than sleeping at home. All the old guys in there are brilliant, they even know what nonsense the god of the sea babbles when he's drunk. I absolutely love it there. I understand. Hades nodded, then instructed. Menuets, take them to where they need to go. Behind Hades, his herdsmen respectfully nodded, then led this group of Atlanteans to the fork in the great road leading to their respective destinies within the fields of truth, guiding this group of Atlanteans to their appropriate destinations. After watching the Atlanteans disappear at the end of the road, Hypnos continued to ask. Hades, if this isn't a good thing for you, how will you avoid it? Should we go to Olympus and demand an explanation from Zeus? Sigh, no need. You two continue your work. The balance of life and death cannot be broken by such childish power struggles. Hades let out a long, helpless sigh, rubbing the bridge of his nose, and said very wearily. Where is the moon goddess these days? I want to go find her. Chapter 119, Chapter 117 Work Needs. After seeing Hades coming to find her from a peeping perspective, Hecate and Ares also hurried back to Hecate's garden from the underworld's magic workshop. As soon as she returned home, Hecate hid in her tree palace and began to dress up. Of course, this dressing up was not for the sake of a woman beautifies herself for her admirer, but rather, the moon goddess wanted to maintain a high status, sage-like image in front of Hades to increase the weight of her words. After all, she was meeting the supreme leader, so Hecate couldn't maintain her most childlike avatar and wear a nightgown with slippers and messy hair, as she did in front of Ares. She, Hecate, was a goddess, not the fiery cloud evil god, she still needed to save face in front of outsiders. Moreover, this sudden incident was crucial to her and Ares's upcoming plans. Success or failure depended on whether Hecate could fool Hades. On the other side, after returning to the garden, Ares immediately transformed into a shoria flower in Hecate's garden, quietly monitoring the entire situation while also preparing to give his teacher reverse guidance on the matter of deception. After all, Hecate's achievements in magic were unparalleled in the Greek world, but she had few followers, so her ability to deceive was naturally below the average of the gods. She couldn't compare to a great deceiver like Ares, who could sweet-talk his way through heaven and earth. A moment later, Hades arrived in front of Hecate's garden. Standing amidst a swaying shoria flower sea, Hades looked at the tree palace towering in the center of the flower sea and called out loudly. Is the goddess of the dark moon Hecate in? I am Hades, and I have something to discuss with you. Can you let me in? Seeing Hades arrive, Ares quietly moved his flower branches and then looked in the direction of the tree palace. A moment later, Hecate's voice came from the tree palace, softly saying, Please come in, Hades. Having spent a long time with this goddess, in Ares's memory, except when she was scolding him or instructing him to do something, his teacher's voice always had a languid, listless quality, sounding as if she would collapse and fall into a deep sleep the next second. Ares had never heard Hecate speak in such a cold and arrogant voice. Honestly, it really did give her a mysterious goddess vibe. After Hecate's voice fell, Hecate's garden automatically opened an entrance for Hades, and he stepped in. When he arrived in the garden, Hecate, having changed her attire, also slowly walked out of the tree palace. At this moment, the goddess had taken on the figure of a young woman. Her graceful and lithe body was enveloped in a black, form-fitting long robe. A series of precious pearls adorned her, hanging from the hem of her skirt and cloak, making a crisp clinking sound as the goddess moved. On her face, there was a black veil covering her fair cheeks, and a hood concealed her forehead, leaving only a pair of wise magic eyes, looking at Hades with a gaze that seemed to see through everything in the world. Seeing Hecate like this, Ares had to admit he was truly impressed. Although since coming to this world, almost all the women Ares had seen were not ugly, they were either goddesses like Athena or Artemis. Even Aphrodite, the most beautiful woman in the Greek world, would stand next to him with a sour face during morning meetings. However, appearance is born from the heart. Ares felt a certain resistance towards these goddesses. He only thought Artemis was a silly younger sister, while Aphrodite and Athena were even more serious. The former he only saw as a hot potato, a beautiful vase that couldn't be touched, and the latter, no matter how beautiful she was, Ares only felt that this woman was scheming against him with every smile and frown. In serious moments, whenever Athena smiled, Ares felt as if he could see a blood-red danger sign above his head. Many signs also proved that this woman had indeed accepted Kratos' commission and was ordered to kill him, but now she was silently plotting something unknown. But Hecate was different. She was probably the goddess with the closest relationship to Ares in the Greek world. Ares had been staying with his teacher for a long time, refusing to leave, and the two of them even had a slight sense of family. When Ares saw Hecate after she had meticulously dressed up, it was like suddenly realizing that the older sister at home, who loved to lie in bed all day, scratch her belly, and snatch the TV remote and snacks, had suddenly transformed into a dazzlingly beautiful woman. If Hecate had gone to Olympus in this appearance to attend the feast of the gods, she would have probably been madly pursued by male gods like Zeus and Poseidon. It was fortunate that the most honest and steady Hades was currently in front of her, so Hecate dared to dress like this to highlight her mysterious aura. And indeed, Hades's expression remained normal after seeing Hecate. Hecate spared no expense to put on a show this time. She didn't even wear her favorite slippers, but walked barefoot on the stinging grass of the underworld. She came before Hades, extended her hand, and the plants on the ground automatically grew, forming a wooden table, 2 opposing stools, a pot of fine wine, 2 cups, and some sweet fruits on the table. "Please be seated, esteemed Hades." After inviting Hades to sit, Hecate directly said to him, "I already know your purpose." Hades was slightly startled. The wine cup he had raised hadn't yet reached his lips. He looked at Hecate with some surprise. "You know this too? After all, it's not just your marriage, but a matter concerning the overall situation of the entire underworld." Hecate nodded slightly, and at the same time, Ares's voice sounded in her mind. "Teacher, that's how you maintain status. Only say half a sentence, leaving the other half hanging. That's how you create mystery." "Understood," Hecate responded in her mind, quietly waiting for Hades's reply. "Since you already know, then it's easier to talk." Hades lowered his head, closed his eyes somewhat helplessly, and then said to Hecate, "Hecate, I want to ask for a method." "Hades, I have many methods here." Hecate chuckled softly. "The key is, which one do you want to ask for?" After a pause, she continued. "This queen of the underworld, do you want her, or not? The authority of the underworld, do you want to release it, or not? All of this depends on your thoughts, esteemed Hades." Chapter 120, Chapter 118 Arrow of Little Eros. Hearing Hecate's words, Hades pondered for a long time, then said with a bitter smile, "This queen of the underworld, of course I don't want her. How could a goddess from Olympus truly like me? Not to mention, this goddess was forcibly taken by me to be the queen of the underworld. Hecate, I believe you know that I actually already have a lover." "No, I really didn't know," Hecate complained in her heart. She had been busy with the mechanical god creation project recently, so she had no time to care about her old boss's private life. But on the surface, she still calmly nodded slightly, indicating that she did know about this matter, and knew it in great detail. If Minth knew about this, with her temper, she would definitely be defiant towards the goddess who became the queen of the underworld. However, she is ultimately just Cocytus, the god of the weeping river, and she herself is just a water nymph. How could she compare to the queen of the underworld who came down from Olympus? "I'm afraid the queen of the underworld will do bad things to her." Seeing Hecate nod slightly, Hades continued to pour out his inner worries. But I also know that my two brothers, Zeus and Poseidon, have always been wary of me. They always think that I want to seize the position of God King that they desire. I don't want to fight with them. If three God King level main gods keep fighting each other, this world might return to chaos, the beginning of star creation. What future would there be then? However, I cannot let Zeus arbitrarily interfere in the underworld. With his personality, he will definitely open back doors for many people in the future. He is already arrogant enough in heaven and on earth. At the very least, I must uphold the order of life and death. So, regarding this matter, you actually want to refuse it, but you are afraid that refusing will lead to conflict and war between you and Zeus and Poseidon, right? Hecate asked. Hades nodded slightly. Then, I have a plan that will allow you to stay away from the vortex of conflict, and also prevent the order of life and death from being controlled by the Queen of the Underworld and Zeus. Hecate raised a finger and said with a smile. You first go to the deepest part of the river of fire, Phlegethon, and find a stone there that will not be melted by the river of fire. I will make a small tool for you. Hades followed her instructions. He went to the river of fire in the underworld, enveloped his entire body with the divine power of death, and then dived into this river full of fire and lava. As the lord of the underworld, Hades would naturally not be harmed by the rivers of the underworld. He circled around in the river of fire for a long time and successfully found the stone Hecate spoke of, then handed it over to Hecate. However, after Hecate received the stone, she told Hades that he could go back and wait. Seeing Hecate's mysterious and confident appearance, the lord of the underworld was also somewhat intimidated. He did not continue to disturb Hecate and returned directly to his black palace. The next day, a lamp Hades managed by Hecate came to the black palace of Hades, the lord of the underworld, and handed a heart-protecting mirror to Hades, saying to him, "Great Hades, from now on, every time you leave the underworld to patrol on the ground, wear this heart-protecting mirror until someone shoots an arrow at you." Shoot an arrow. Hades took the heart-protecting mirror, which was engraved with magical runes, from the lamp Hades. He thought for a moment, then seemed to understand and nodded slightly. "I understand. Please thank Hecate for me." While Hades was busy guarding against his brothers like Zeus causing trouble on Olympus, Zeus and the other main gods were also constantly busy with their plan to ambush Hades. After several days of prayer and rituals in her temple, Aphrodite finally used the resonance of her divine status as the goddess of love and beauty to cross the long river of time, go back to the time when this planet was born, and obtain a one-time divine artifact from Eros, who possessed the divine status of the primordial god of love. Holding this small bow and arrow, which was like a toy and decorated with pink hearts, Aphrodite called her son, Little Eros, over. Little Eros looked like a somewhat chubby little boy with a pair of wings on his back. In the original mythology, he was the child born from the illicit affair between Ares and Aphrodite. However, now, Ares consciously stayed away from Aphrodite, this dissolute goddess, but perhaps due to the push of the fates in the unseen, this little god was born after all. The problem now was that even Aphrodite didn't know who the father of this little god was. He might have the noble divine blood of Zeus, or the sea god's blood of Poseidon, and it was not impossible for him to be the child of other miscellaneous deities like the wind god, rain god, or river god. However, as a main god, it was not troublesome for Aphrodite to be a single mother, so she didn't bother to think about who little Eros's biological father was. She was quite fond of her cute and slightly mischievous son and had always wanted to find a good divine position for him on Olympus. This time, ambushing Hades was a good opportunity. So, holding the bow and arrow of the primordial god of love, Eros, Aphrodite softly said to her son, "Little Eros. Eros, Mama has a gift for you." "What? Really?" Eros had the body of a child and the mind of a child. Hearing this, he immediately ran over happily, hugged Aphrodite's neck, and kissed her on the cheek. "Mama is the best. What's the gift? I heard you learned archery from Apollo, Aphrodite said softly. So Mama is going to give you a bow and arrow, it's here. With that, she handed the one-time divine artifact she had obtained from the primordial god of love to Eros. Eros happily took the small bow and arrow. He found that it fit his size perfectly, and immediately became inseparable from it. This bow and arrow has very powerful might. If you shoot anyone with it, even a main god will have to submit to its power. Aphrodite then pulled little Eros closer and said to him somewhat seriously. And currently, there is only one arrow in heaven and on earth. Don't use it carelessly. Oh. Eros nodded upon hearing this, then said with a hint of disinterest, but Mama, what's the use of a bow and arrow that can only shoot once? Of course it's useful. Since it's a bow and arrow that can only shoot once, then naturally, this one shot must be used on the most valuable target. Aphrodite smiled and extended her hand to Eros, while secretly notifying the other main gods involved in the plan. Then she said to her son, "Come on, Eros, Mama will take you to find that most valuable target, and let all the gods in heaven and on earth see your power." Chapter 121, Chapter 119. Bounce back. Inside the God King's hall, Zeus received a signal from Aphrodite, then winked at the main gods below him. Aphrodite has sent the signal, we can begin. This plan was originally discussed and formulated by the 12 main gods, and theoretically, all main gods should have been informed when it was put into action. However, at present, only Athena and Hermes were involved with Zeus in the God King's hall. This was a decision Zeus made after much deliberation. Firstly, Apollo and Artemis showed little interest in ambushing Hades. Poseidon was someone Zeus had always guarded against, just as Ares targeted Athena, Zeus had always tried to marginalize his brother. Demeter's beloved daughter, Persephone, was the candidate for queen of the underworld, and if she knew, she might divorce Zeus. As for Ares, Zeus feared that his foolish son would only mess up their plans if he joined. As for Hestia, Zeus didn't dare mention this to his eldest sister. Hestia always valued family relationships, and if the goddess of the hearth knew about the absurd scheme Zeus and Poseidon concocted to entrap their elder brother, she might get angry and complain to Rhea, ultimately leading to the Earth's will questioning Zeus's qualification to be God King. So, after much deliberation, besides Aphrodite, Zeus only enlisted Hermes and Athena to command this plan with him. Upon receiving Aphrodite's signal, Zeus immediately ordered Hermes to go to the earth. He first had Hermes issue a command to a city-state that worshipped him, asking them to hold a large sacrifice prepared for Hades. Then, he had Hermes go to the underworld to inform Hades of this, telling him to leave the underworld and enjoy his offerings on earth. After Hermes left, Zeus looked at Athena, "Athena, I'll leave Persephone to you." "Leave it to me, Zeus." Athena bowed. "I promise not to arouse Demeter's suspicion." Athena turned and walked out of the God King's hall, while Zeus continued to observe the overall plan using the Olympus holy fire within the God King's hall. He saw that after leaving the God King's hall, Athena went directly to Artemis's temple, inviting the goddess of the hunt to go pick flowers in Enna. Artemis, unsuspecting, readily agreed. Then Athena took her to Demeter's temple, calling upon Persephone, who was still Demeter's subordinate goddess. Throughout this entire process, Athena acted extremely naturally, showing no hint of anything amiss. Demeter also had no reservations about Athena and Artemis. After all, they were two virgin goddesses, and she believed they wouldn't do anything to her dear Persephone like those old perverts on Olympus. After Demeter nodded in agreement, the three goddesses chatted and laughed as they rode the clouds from Olympus. The three of them, like good friends, arrived in Enna, finding it lush and green everywhere. Under the influence of Demeter's divine power, even more flowers bloomed there for the three goddesses to pick. Upon seeing the esteemed Athena, Artemis, and Persephone arrive, the nymphs of Enna also flew out from their respective dwellings, actively following the three goddesses, picking flowers with them, and trying to make an impression on the three goddesses. Upon seeing Persephone arrive at the designated location, Zeus reluctantly averted his gaze from his beautiful daughter and looked elsewhere. He saw that shortly after Hermes arrived in the underworld, a crack appeared at the edge of the earth, and Hades, driving a chariot pulled by 4 black steeds, emerged from the underworld and moved towards Enna. Seeing this, Zeus quickly sent a message to Aphrodite and her son. Aphrodite, Hades has appeared. Get into position quickly. Understood. After Aphrodite ended her communication with Zeus, she also took her son, Eros, to the skies above Enna. The mother and son quietly hid in the clouds of Enna. Zeus then used his god-king authority to conceal the figures of the beautiful goddess and her son with more clouds, preventing them from being discovered by unrelated individuals like Demeter. Soon after, Hades's chariot, billowing black smoke, drove overhead. In the clear blue sky, the underworld king's chariot was quite conspicuous. The goddesses on the ground in Enna also noticed their uncle's chariot, but Persephone paid no mind. Her great-uncle had always been aloof, and she believed Hades was merely passing by. Hades, who was driving, also saw the goddesses. He frowned slightly, seemingly sensing something, but after touching his chest, he paid no attention and continued driving towards the location Hermes had informed him of. At this moment, Aphrodite, hidden in the clouds, leaned over and embraced her son, Eros's, shoulders. She whispered in her son's ear. The time has come, my dear Eros. This arrow will make the gods recognize your power. Do you see? Your target is on that black chariot. Even the aloof Hades cannot escape love and entanglement. Yes, mother, I understand. Eros, a newborn calf unafraid of tigers, had no idea what it meant to shoot an underworld king with a bow and arrow. He wholeheartedly believed his mother would not harm him. Thus, fearless in his ignorance, Eros picked up the bow and arrow of the primordial god of love, aimed from the clouds at the figure seated on the black chariot. He took a deep breath, relaxed, then, using the steady stance Apollo taught him, drew the bowstring taut, aimed at Hades's chest, and then gently released. Whoosh! The arrow of the primordial god of love, with its heart-shaped tip, cut through the air with a faint pink glow, flying directly towards Hades's chest at a visible yet unavoidable speed, successfully hitting him. But just as Zeus and Aphrodite were about to cheer, the arrow of the primordial god of love seemed to hit some hard armor, making a faint clang sound. Then, it was directly deflected by the underworld king's chest, changed direction and flew straight down to the ground, shooting towards the 3 goddesses picking flowers in Enna. Danger! Seeing this, Athena quickly dodged, and Artemis was also pulled away by a hand suddenly reaching out from behind, leaving only Persephone, who didn't understand what was happening, frozen in place. Thud! The deflected arrow accurately pierced Persephone's chest, then transformed into a pink light and disappeared into the body of the goddess of seeds. Chapter 122, Chapter 120. Athena, Shashasha. After being struck in the chest by an arrow of love, Persephone froze in place. Hurry! Artemis hadn't yet recovered when the person who had just pulled her urged her again, grabbing her arm and quickly retreating into the distance. It wasn't until she was pulled by that person to a place where Persephone was no longer visible that Artemis finally came to her senses. With lingering fear, she looked back at the person who had just saved her. As expected, standing behind her was her dear brother, Apollo. The handsome god's face was filled with anger, mixed with a hint of lingering fear. He noticed his sister's gaze and replied. Thanks to Helios, who saw Hades' chariot from the sky and informed me, otherwise you might have been hit, Artemis. I warned you, don't play with Athena for no reason. I didn't expect it either. Artemis finally realized what had just happened, and a hint of indignation appeared on her face. Zeus didn't even notify us. He never trusted us anyway, Apollo sneered, then added, we just need to watch from afar, don't get involved. Artemis nodded, and then the siblings cautiously peeked out together, observing the situation with Persephone. Artemis had her brother Apollo to pull her, but Athena, one of the instigators, wasn't so lucky. The moment she saw Persephone get hit by the arrow, she thought, "This is bad," and quickly tried to run, but by then, Persephone's gaze had already fallen on her. Persephone seemed unaware that she had been struck by an arrow. She just looked at Athena, and as she watched, 2 blush clouds suddenly appeared on her fair face. Danger! Athena, the goddess of wisdom, who feared nothing, felt an involuntary surge of fear in her heart as she met her best friend's gaze. She swallowed with some difficulty, then cautiously asked, "Persephone, are you all right?" Athena. Persephone stared intently at her good friend, her eyes seemingly melting. "Why do I suddenly feel that you are so beautiful?" She sniffed, then continued, blushing, speaking slowly in a fanatical tone, "I don't know why, but when I see your face, my heart beats so fast, and my body feels so hot. Ah, your hair smells so good too, Cai." As she spoke, Persephone suddenly leaned in like a dog, breathing heavily next to Athena's ear. Athena immediately felt a chill down her spine. She quickly retreated and said to Persephone, "Persephone, be normal, I'm a little scared." I feel like I've always been normal." Persephone wiped the glistening drool from the corner of her mouth, grinning foolishly as she continued to approach Athena. "Athena, you're so cute." "Persephone, stay away from me." Athena was so scared that she even pulled out her shield, Aegis. "Listen to me, you need to calm down now, and it's best to keep a certain distance from me." "I am very calm." Persephone quickened her steps, extending her fair arms, and pounced towards Athena, wanting to hug her. Athena, startled, quickly flashed away, avoiding the goddess of spring, then she sped up and fled the scene without looking back. "Athena! Wait for me!" Seeing her beloved goddess flee, Persephone stomped her foot and chased after her, emitting a terrifying sound as she pursued Athena. "Athena! Athena! Athena! Ah 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 ah!" Hearing this scream, which sounded like a demon from hell, Hades, who was originally prepared to act as if nothing had happened, couldn't help but stop his chariot. He shook his head as he watched the 2 streaks of light fleeing towards the horizon, one after the other. "You made your own bed, now you have to lie in it, niece." 2 days later, in the God King's hall on Olympus, Ares, after hearing Apollo and Artemis's report, couldn't help but slap his thigh and point at Athena, who stood opposite him with a face as black as a pot, bursting into laughter. "Ha ha 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 ha! Oh my god, this is too much, Athena, you're amazing, Ares, concede defeat." After laughing, he pinched his voice and called out to Athena in a coquettish tone. "Athena, Athena cai. Enough! Shut up!" Ares. Zeus, mortified, slapped the golden table in front of him and roared at the main gods present. "The question now is, who told Hades about this? Step forward." The main gods exchanged glances, then Apollo was the first to speak. He let out a slight sneer, then said in a sarcastic tone, "Who knows? It certainly wasn't Artemis and me, after all, we only knew the plan had begun the moment little Eros shot his arrow." After speaking, he gave his father a meaningful look, and after his brother finished, the white-haired Artemis also showed a somewhat indignant expression. "I don't know either." Aphrodite carefully shielded little Eros, who was trembling at her feet, and said tremblingly, "Zeus, I can guarantee that I was always performing the ritual to exchange the original love god Eros's divine artifacts. I didn't have the opportunity to do this." "Humph, no matter who did it." Demeter glared at Zeus with a face full of anger, gritting her teeth and saying, "Anyway, I want to thank him. If it weren't for him, would my daughter have stayed in the underworld forever?" "Enough, Demeter, you shut up first, we'll talk about this later." Zeus felt a little guilty, but he still forcefully suppressed one of his wives. He turned to look at his queen and saw Hera staring at her fingernails with disinterest. Hera had no motive to interfere in Hades' affairs. After watching for a while, Zeus shook his head, then glanced at Hephaestus, who was silently bowing his head, and shook his head again. Finally, he looked around and then fixed his gaze on his brother, Poseidon, and his son, Ares. Ares. Zeus summoned his divine power, lightning flashing around him, his eyes glowing, and pressed Ares. "Tell me honestly, did you tell Hades about this?" "Hey? You suspect me?" Ares couldn't help but laugh. "Yes, Zeus, I won't hide it anymore. I just don't like your and Athena's sneaky tactics behind people's backs. But I, Ares, have always acted honorably. If I wanted to tell Hades, I would go to the underworld and shout loudly to him in front of all the gods of the underworld, 'Hades, Zeus is going to mess with you.' I disdain to use such petty methods of backstabbing, okay?" Hearing his forceful words, all the main gods present, except Athena, turned their heads away. Then, Ares continued, "Instead of agonizing over this, you might as well go directly and ask Hades who told him. To be honest, Hades isn't afraid of us at all, he'll definitely tell you directly if you ask him." Hearing Ares' words, Zeus's face turned purple with anger, as if he had swallowed a large pile of excrement. However, Ares's words, though crude, were not without reason. Hades indeed was not afraid of him. Thus, Zeus successfully contacted Hades, who had already finished enjoying the sacrifices and returned to the underworld, through the Olympus holy fire, and asked him this question. "What? Who told me?" Hades smiled and said. "All right, it doesn't matter if I tell you. This matter was actually told to me by a group of Atlantean spirits." Chapter 123, Chapter 121. Sea and Sky Split. Atlanteans. As Hades finished speaking, the group of main gods present all turned their gaze to Poseidon. "What a joke!" Poseidon also cried out in a panic. "Hades, don't slander me! How could the Atlanteans dare to betray me? Why wouldn't they dare?" Hades put away his smile and calmly said to his brother. "Poseidon, have you forgotten? You fought against Athena's city-state before, and due to your command errors, a large number of Atlanteans died. After returning, you performed another divine punishment on Atlantis, and another group died in that. Moreover, you only appeased your anger by accepting a batch of their sacrifices afterward. I remember the offerings Atlantis gave you were a group of beautiful women, right? These women, whom you consumed as offerings, happened to be the wives and daughters of the Atlanteans who died in the war and divine punishment. Some of them were your priests, some were Atlantean royalty, so it's not strange that they knew these things. After you did such things to them, do you think they would still fear you? Their anger towards you has long surpassed their fear." Facing Hades' questioning, Poseidon was speechless for a long time. "That's why Hestia and I have always been telling you to be more lenient with your subordinates and more merciful to your believers. Why won't you listen?" Hearing Hades start lecturing them again, Zeus impatiently interrupted him. "All right, Hades, stop talking. Poseidon, how do we settle this matter?" "Hades." Poseidon also said to Hades with a gloomy face. "Hand over these leakers to me. I will personally deal with them." "No, they are already dead, and they are not under your jurisdiction." Hades didn't take his brother's threat to heart at all. He resolutely refused Poseidon's request and added, "What's more, most of these Atlanteans have already been sentenced by me to Tartarus for punishment. There is basically no more tragic punishment than that. All right, Poseidon, don't try to shift the blame for this matter onto a group of mortals. They cannot bear this responsibility," Zeus said in a deep voice. Only the main gods who were in the God King's hall that day knew about this initially. If the Atlanteans knew about it, it must have been you who revealed it. "But I didn't tell the Atlanteans. Poseidon argued forcefully. Then have you told other sea gods or sea creatures about this? Athena also unhappily added insult to injury. This. Poseidon was speechless, because after he returned to his golden palace, he had indeed mentioned this matter to other minor sea gods and sea creatures while drinking and boasting. It's not impossible that these people, in turn, told their confidants, and some of those confidants might have been Atlanteans. If you didn't tell anyone else, how could the Atlanteans possibly know about this? As Zeus spoke, he had already raised his divine lightning. Poseidon, receive your punishment. Zeus, as brothers, do you really have to be so ruthless? Poseidon also picked up his trident, looking warily at the sizzling, high-heat divine lightning in Zeus's hand. Zeus, Poseidon is your elder brother. Hades in the holy fire said. Even I didn't blame you and him for plotting against me, so why are you blaming him? Exactly. Demeter also folded her arms and said sarcastically from the side. Some people even sell their own daughters, truly shameless. Enough. As the God King, I must keep my word, otherwise how can my authority be established? After Zeus finished speaking, disregarding Hades and Demeter's persuasion, he raised his hand and hurled the divine lightning. Inside the God King's hall, a terrifying bolt of lightning flashed past, and at this moment, Poseidon also raised his divine power. Azure waves appeared within the God King's hall, colliding with the lightning in mid-air. After a thunderous roar, the gods on Olympus only saw a mass of cerulean sea water fly out of the God King's hall, falling down Olympus and eventually landing in the boundless ocean. At the same time, Poseidon's voice echoed from the ocean in the distance. Zeus, from today onwards, don't even think I'll ever set foot in your God King's hall again. After he finished speaking, heaven and earth shook, and angry waves surged in the sea. All the ships sailing in the ocean at this time were smashed by the angry Sea King's waves. Many of these ships were from Athens, Delphi, Cyprus, and other city-states that worshipped the main gods. Fortunately, Ares had already forbidden the ships of Sparta, Thebes, and other city-states from sailing before this incident occurred, which prevented them from suffering heavy losses like the other city-states. The Sea King's action also more or less signified that he and Zeus were already estranged, even if nominally he was still one of the god kings of the Olympian pantheon. But now, he would no longer help his younger brother, Zeus, the heavenly god. Upon witnessing this scene, the other gods on Olympus were all shocked, but of course, they still dared not say or ask anything. Good riddance, do you think I want to see you on Olympus? Looking at the empty seat of the Sea King, Zeus snorted coldly, while Hades in the holy fire sighed deeply, shook his head, and actively hung up the communication with Zeus. Seeing Hades leave, Zeus turned to Athena and asked, "How is Persephone?" "She's fine, except for losing control when she sees me, she's normal at other times." Athena swallowed with some difficulty and said, "As a last resort, I could only knock her out. Now she is recuperating in Demeter's temple." "Ha, Zeus, you don't need to pretend to care about Persephone anymore. Her condition has nothing to do with you." Persephone's mother, the goddess of agriculture Demeter, coldly said to her husband, "Don't oppose me at this time, Demeter." Zeus waved his hand irritably and said, "The key now is, Persephone, who was hit by the arrow of the god of love, has completely fallen in love with Athena. How should she be dealt with? How to deal with it? Just let the lovers be together and let her be with Athena." Ares said gloatingly from the side. "Oh, right, Artemis, a private question, when two goddesses are intimate, does it count as breaking the virgin goddess oath?" "It shouldn't, right?" Artemis pondered for a long time, then said, "I have also bathed with my subordinate gods, and I haven't seen anything happen to my virgin goddess oath." "Oh, perfect then." Ares winked at Athena and said, "Great goddess Athena, please quickly take in this little vixen Persephone." Chapter 124, Chapter 122. Hades is no better than Zeus? Athena stared at the sarcastic Ares for a moment, then retorted. Then why don't you just find a handsome man to be gay? I see you really like the Spartan way. Who knows if men being intimate with men will break a god's vow of chastity? There's a high probability it will be broken, Apollo replied upon hearing this. Because men who love men will have intimate contact. At his words, Artemis, Ares, and Athena all looked at him with surprise. Was there something wrong with what I said? Seeing the main gods looking at him with such expressions, the god of light scratched his smooth chin, feeling a bit puzzled. I think handsome boys are cuter than beautiful women. It's nothing, nothing. Ares looked at Apollo with a hint of awe, then secretly decided to immediately promote sex education courses in Sparta to enhance boys' self-protection awareness. However, he outwardly pretended to be indignant, looking at Athena, and said. Hearing Apollo's words made me tremble all over. In this hot weather, I'm covered in cold sweat and my hands and feet are freezing. Can this world still be saved? How do we gods have to live to satisfy you? Tears flowed uncontrollably. This world is full of oppression against gods. When can gods truly stand up? Crunch! Athena gritted her teeth, looking at the sarcastic god of war, and clenched her fists, making them crack. All right, why say so much? Zeus suppressed his anger, looked at Athena, and asked. Athena, do you want Persephone? No, Athena quickly shook her head. I have no interest in that. Then so be it, Zeus said. Send Persephone to the underworld to recuperate and let her become queen of the underworld. Eros is already dead, and no matter how powerful his divine artifact is, it has a time limit. Once the fire of lust in Persephone's heart extinguishes, or after she is conquered by Hades, then let her return to Olympus. No. Upon hearing Zeus's words, Demeter was the first to object. I will not allow Persephone to go to the underworld. To marry Hades. Demeter. Zeus frowned. This is for Persephone's own good. Bah! If you want to marry Hades, why don't you go yourself? Demeter angrily retorted, anyway, I absolutely will not agree to Persephone going to that dark and sunless underworld. If you dare to force her, then I, her mother, will take back all the vegetation on earth, and you can just rule over a barren land. After Demeter made her statement, Zeus and she immediately started arguing in the God King's hall. The specific content of their argument is not convenient to mention, but it was basically a repeat of the previous argument between Zeus and Hera, with Rhea and Cronus once again being caught in the crossfire. However, this time, the goddess of agriculture, Demeter, indeed held power that made Zeus wary. No god wished to rule a lifeless, desolate world. In the past, he could have used violence to force this goddess, who was not skilled in combat, into submission. Unfortunately, this time, Demeter, a doting mother, for the sake of Persephone, stubbornly stood her ground against Zeus, refusing to agree to Persephone being forcibly married to Hades. In the end, it was Athena who stepped forward and spoke a fair word. Goddess Demeter, I stand on a neutral ground to speak a fair word. She raised her arms, stopping the bickering god king and his wife, then said gently. Currently, the best treatment for Persephone is still for her to quietly stay in the underworld. What kind of fair word is that, you ass? Demeter angrily retorted. Ultimately, isn't it because of what you and Zeus did together that my poor Persephone was afflicted? If you really want to take responsibility, then strip naked and use yourself to alleviate Persephone's symptoms. Goddess Demeter, please calm down. I admit this is my fault, and I apologize to you. Athena waved her hand and continued to persuade. But, please think carefully, is it really good for me and Persephone to be together? Are you sure that after she follows me, I won't take advantage of her? This. Demeter thought for a moment, then said coldly, Humph, that is indeed a problem. Consider this again, if she follows Hades, then she will be queen of the underworld, Hades, by both reason and emotion, will have to protect her. We all know what kind of person Hades is. He values family ties the most and is the most responsible. Athena subtly glanced at Zeus, coughed, and then said, "Following Hades is always better than following Zeus, right?" Demeter hesitated upon hearing this, while Zeus loudly exclaimed, "Athena, what are you saying? I am the god king." Upon hearing Zeus's words, Demeter gave him a rather disdainful look, then said to the gods present, "I will discuss this matter with Hades myself. You all stay out of it. If anyone dares to act slyly, be careful, or I will make sure your territories yield nothing in the future." After speaking, the goddess of agriculture angrily left. The gods looked at each other, and Zeus, feeling dispirited, announced the dismissal of the meeting. As the gods dispersed, Athena was the first to leave. She practically fled back to her own temple. To be honest, Persephone's state had indeed frightened the goddess of wisdom, and this seed goddess was now staying in Demeter's temple, making her Athena's neighbor. Now, her greatest fear was walking on Olympus and encountering the seed goddess. She couldn't hit this little ancestor, nor could she say she was violating herself. She could almost only run away. Afterward, several goddesses also left the God King's hall one after another. After seeing Hera and Demeter leave, Zeus suddenly called out to Apollo and asked, "Apollo, tell me more about what you said earlier, about the boys." Ares, who was walking past them, couldn't help but give Zeus a speechless look, then continued walking, putting more distance between himself and the two gods. In the underworld, Hades, having finished his discussion with Demeter, found his way to Hecate's home. He asked the moon goddess, who had changed her disguise again. "Hecate, I have already discussed with Demeter. As for Persephone's matter, you agreed to marry her as queen of the underworld." Following Ares's hint, Hecate asked, "Yes, after all, she and Athena are both my nieces, I'll help if I can." Hades nodded with some difficulty. "But I really don't want anything to happen with my niece, and I can't let her disrupt the order of life and death. Do you have a solution?" "Of course," Hecate said with a smile. "Great king of the underworld, please listen carefully. You just..." Chapter 125, Chapter 123. Regent of the Underworld. What? The next day, Zeus, in the God King's hall on Olympus, looked at Hades in the sacred fire and asked in surprise, "You want a vacation? What's wrong? Can't I?" Hades, in the sacred fire, retorted, "Ever since you destroyed the humans of the Silver Age, we in the underworld have been cleaning up your messes, while you and Poseidon often have free time to go around seducing and having children." "What? The gods on Olympus can take vacations, but I, Hades, the king of the underworld, don't deserve one." "Of course not." Zeus thought to himself that he wished Hades would be out of the underworld during this time, and he replied, "Go on vacation if you want, but Persephone is unwell in body and mind and is not suitable to follow you around. She must remain in the underworld. That's for sure. I've already discussed it with Demeter. Although Persephone has become queen of the underworld, she and I are not in a marital relationship. She doesn't interfere with my private life, and I won't interfere with hers. If she takes a liking to anyone in the future, she's free to pursue them." Hades said, "I've also made arrangements here in the underworld. Just send Persephone over for recuperation." All right." Zeus nodded repeatedly. After cutting off communication with Hades, he immediately ordered Hermes to send the dejected Persephone to the underworld. When the divine messenger arrived in the underworld, crossing the river Acheron, he happened to meet Hades in the Fields of Truth, who was about to leave the underworld to go on vacation. When Hermes saw the king of the underworld, he was not wearing his usual oppressive black robe, nor was he wearing the crown symbolizing his authority as king of the underworld. He didn't even have his divine artifact, the bident, with him. However, by his side, there was a beautiful nymph in a plain white dress with long grey hair. "Uncle!" Upon seeing Hades, Hermes greeted him and said, "I have brought the queen of the underworld." Hades glanced at Persephone but did not linger long on the beautiful blonde goddess. He merely smiled at Persephone like an elder and then said, "Persephone, come in. I have already had Hypnos and Thanatos prepare your palace. From now on, this is your home. If you get tired of staying here, you can also return to your mother's side. Just say the word, and Charon will ferry you across the river, and Cerberus will not stop you." But considering your situation, you must still stay here for 4 months each year, understand?" Under Hades' gentle voice, Persephone slowly let go of her fear and nodded slightly. "Uncle." Seeing Hades finish speaking and prepare to leave, holding the hand of the woman beside him, Hermes quickly called out to him and then probed on behalf of Zeus. "If you leave, how will the underworld operate? Will Persephone take over?" "Alas, Persephone is here to recuperate. How can I make her work?" Hades waved his hand magnanimously and said, "Don't worry, I have many capable deities under my command. They will continue to work after I leave. Thanatos and Hypnos will be responsible for reaping the souls of the deceased, Charon will continue to ferry them, and the 3 judges sent by Zeus will continue the work of judging souls in my stead. But what if they become negligent?" Hermes pressed on relentlessly. "This is no small matter. If the balance of life and death is disturbed and the dead return to the human world, there will be major problems in the world. So you know this is no small matter." Hades secretly scoffed, but on the surface, he put on an elder's dignified demeanor, waved his hand at Hermes, and then said, All right. Since I'm leaving, I've certainly arranged for someone to supervise their work. Hermes, as a chief god of Olympus, don't concern yourself with things outside your jurisdiction. Look, the lamp Hades have come to pick up Persephone. Let's go, don't disturb her rest." With that, Hades reached out and pressed Hermes' shoulder, then pushed him towards the exit of the underworld. As mentioned before, Hermes was a lightweight compared to other chief gods. His total divine power couldn't even compare to Aphrodite, who was widely known as the Vase of the gods. This is also why he had to ask his old father Zeus for help if he wanted a night of passion with the goddess of beauty. And Hades, the king of the underworld, was someone even Zeus and Poseidon feared. Even other chief gods would be awed by the terrifying aura of death emanating from him, let alone Hermes. When Hades' hand rested on his shoulder, Hermes felt as if he had been grabbed by the hair by death himself. He felt as if Hades only needed to exert a little force, and he would be forever trapped in the underworld. His hands and feet turned cold, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. He dared not utter a single word of defiance to Hades. He was led by the king of the underworld, walking directly over the waves of the river Acheron, out of the Hell Gate, and away from the underworld. All right, Hermes, go back to Olympus. Standing at the Hell Gate, Hades smiled at Hermes and said, Tell Zeus that everything is well in the underworld. Tell him there's no need to worry about these things. Hermes turned his head, looking at his smiling uncle, and then at the terrifying beast crouching behind the Hell Gate. He swallowed, ultimately not daring to enter the underworld again to probe, but instead transformed into a gust of wind and returned to the heavens. Meanwhile, under the guidance of a group of lamp Hades, NYMPHSS of the underworld, Persephone, now nominally the queen of the underworld, was invited by them to the center of the underworld. From afar, the golden-haired goddess of seeds saw the immense black palace towering over the boundless barren lands of the underworld, situated between Elysium and Tartarus. The grandeur of the entire palace was no less than that of the temples on Olympus. However, compared to Olympus, this black palace only filled Persephone with a sense of coldness and desolation. She was led into this black palace by a group of underworld nymphs holding blue candle flames. Along the way, she encountered many skeletal soldiers clad in heavy armor, wielding great axes or sharp blades. These were Hades' ghostly army. After passing through layers of undecorated corridors within the Black Palace, Persephone finally arrived at the center of the underworld's Black Palace, which had once been Hades' ruling hall. "Please enter, esteemed queen of the underworld." As they arrived before the royal hall, an underworld nymph whispered to her, "The regent of the underworld, temporarily governing on behalf of His Majesty Hades, is waiting for you inside." To lamp Hades blew a chilling wind, pushing open the doors of the royal hall for her. As Persephone entered the royal hall under their guidance, she saw the purple-haired goddess holding a bident, seated with crossed legs on Hades' black throne. She had the figure of a young girl, wearing a long black dress and a black transparent veil over her face. Yet, this attire only added to her allure. Looking at Persephone, Hecate, seated on Hades' throne, rose with a smile and softly said to her, "Welcome to the underworld, dear queen of the underworld Persephone. I am the goddess of the dark moon Hecate, temporarily acting as regent of the underworld on behalf of Hades. Let us get along well from now on." Chapter 126, Chapter 124. Gifts of Ares and Hecate. It worked. Ares clenched his fists and couldn't help but whisper as he watched Hecate, sitting on the throne, flash a charming smile at Persephone. Goddess of the dark moon Hecate is a unique existence, both in heaven and on earth, possessing the title of Great Goddess. She is also an entity in the world that does not belong to the regular goddess sequence of Olympus, yet still commands the awe of the king of gods. With her presiding over the underworld, Hades doesn't have to worry about Zeus disrupting the order of life and death, nor does he have to worry about the remaining underworld forces being unable to contend with Queen of the Underworld Persephone. For these reasons, Hecate finally persuaded Hades. Hades temporarily entrusted his power as king of the underworld to her, and he himself left the underworld with his lover Minth to temporarily avoid the limelight on earth. Unfortunately, Hades was also cautious. He always remembered his most important duty, guarding the bronze prison deep within Tartarus, where the second-generation Titan Sin gods were imprisoned. Before leaving, although he handed over his bident and helm of invisibility to Hecate for safekeeping, he still kept the key that could open the bronze prison close to him.